What if the gods you worship were never meant to rule? Not by fate. Not by strength. Not by right. What if Olympus was a stolen throne, built atop the bones of an empire drowned in fire and blood? They whisper of the Titanomachy, the war that shook the heavens, a battle so cataclysmic the earth itself cracked open to drink the blood of fallen gods. They call it the rise of the Olympians. A triumph. A prophecy fulfilled. They are lying. The truth is buried, suffocated beneath centuries of half-told myths and mutilated histories. The victors wrote their own legend, casting themselves as saviors and their enemies as monsters. But the Titans were no mindless brutes. They were the first rulers, the original architects of divine order, gods whose power sculpted existence itself. And they did not fall easily. Cronus, the Titan king who devoured his own children rather than surrender to fate. Atlas, the warrior who led the last stand, his defiance so absolute Zeus cursed him to bear the sky on his shoulders forever. Prometheus, the betrayer, the trickster, the thief who stole the sacred fire and damned himself to eternal torment. Their names are spoken as cautionary tales, stripped of the terror and majesty they once commanded. But the war was no simple conquest. It was a massacre. It was a betrayal of cosmic proportions. And it may not be over. The cracks are still there, hidden beneath Olympus' golden halls, echoes of an ancient vengeance waiting to be unleashed. Have you ever wondered why Zeus fears prophecy? Why he shatters omens, silences seers, and hunts down those who seek forbidden knowledge? Because he knows. He knows the Titans never truly died. They are waiting. Watching. Plotting from the abyss where he cast them, chains rattling, fury festering. The sky trembles, the ground stirs, and something ancient shifts in the darkness. The Olympians won the war. But wars never truly end. Silence. A silence so vast, so bottomless, it swallows time itself. There is no light, no breath, no thought, only the endless, crushing weight of nothing. It stretches forever, a void so absolute that existence itself is a foreign concept. No stars, no sky, no earth. Just the gaping maw of oblivion, waiting, devouring, eternal. Then, a tremor. Small at first, a ripple through the emptiness. Then another. The void shudders. Something ancient, something boundless, moves. A sound like the first heartbeat in a corpse-filled world, a thud low and thunderous. Space fractures. Time cracks. And from the mouth of chaos itself, something begins. A force erupts, violent, hungry, alive. It rides, an untamed storm of raw, pulsing energy, twisting and folding into itself as if it is both birth and destruction in the same instant. Fire without flame. Matter without form. A pressure so immense it would crush reality if reality had existed. Then, from this storm, Gaia breathes. Not born. Not created. She is. The first mother, the endless earth, the foundation of everything that will ever be. But she is alone, wrapped in the aching void, her presence a whisper against the eternal silence. She stretches, unfurling from the chaos, carving herself into existence, shaping the formless abyss with every pulse of her being. She is vast, her body stretching beyond thought, her skin the soil, her breath the wind, her veins rivers waiting to be filled. But she is incomplete. There is no sky. No vastness above to embrace her, no stars to dance upon her breath. Just the weight of empty blackness pressing, suffocating. And so she calls him forth, Uranus. His arrival is not gentle. He tears into existence, a force of immeasurable power, the sky itself roaring to life, stretching wide, endless, unyielding. His presence is crushing, celestial, a dome of unimaginable expanse rolling across Gaia's form. He is not soft. He is domination. A storm trapped in infinity, his breath the winds that will one day howl through mountains, his body the endless vault above the earth. Gaia trembles beneath him, the first shudder of creation, of union, of something unknowable and terrifying. They collide in a way that is neither love nor war, a fusion of forces too vast to be contained by mortal understanding. From their embrace, something stirs. The first Titans. Not weak, not fragile things. They do not crawl from the earth like infants. They rise. Cronus, the inevitable, his gaze cold as prophecy. The last-born but the most dangerous, his hands already reaching for a future soaked in blood. Hyperion, the burning force, the first to bear the sun's fire in his heart. Oceanus, whose veins run with the first waters, endless, unknowable, deep enough to drown time itself. Coeus, the silent watcher, his mind an abyss of wisdom even the gods will fear. Iapetus, the spearhead, the wound that never heals, a warrior before war has been given a name. Thea, whose eyes gleam with the golden light of treasures not yet forged. Rhea, the mother-to-be, the bearer of kings and revolutions. Mnemosyne, the keeper of echoes, where memories will find a home. Phoebe, veiled in silver, the first whisper of the moon's glow. Tessis, the tidebringer, whose touch will shape the oceans. Crius, the forgotten one, the shadow of things yet to be. They are not gods. They are more. They breathe, and the world quakes. Their footsteps carve valleys, their voices shake the stars that have not yet been born. They are power, raw and untamed, the first rulers of existence itself. And Uranus fears them. He sees their strength, the way they shape the young world with their mere presence. He sees Cronus, the way the Titan watches him with eyes too sharp, too knowing. Uranus does not speak it, but the dread coils in his chest. These are not mere children. They are threats. Gaia watches, and she knows. She feels it in the marrow of her boundless form, in the whispers of the winds that have not yet learned to howl. She is the earth, she does not forget, does not ignore. Uranus will try to crush what he cannot control. She will not let him. Something stirs beneath her surface, deep within the bones of the world itself. Something vast, something hidden. She says nothing. Not yet. The Titans stand upon the newborn world, their shadows stretching long, their gazes fixed upon the sky above. They do not yet know it, but the first war of gods has already begun. The sky never blinked. Not once. Not in all the endless nights that stretched over the young world like a prison of stars. The sky was watching, always watching. Uranus loomed above, vast and merciless, his form stretching beyond sight, his presence suffocating. He was no gentle father, no loving creator. He was control. He was the weight of an iron will pressing down upon the earth, crushing it beneath an unrelenting gaze. Gaia could feel him. Everywhere. His breath in the winds. His whispers in the rustling leaves. His cold indifference settling over her like a shroud. She had given birth to him, to the sky, to his endless dominion above. But he had never been hers. He had never been kind. He took what he wanted. He seeded her with life, filling her womb with gods too powerful to remain still, too wild to be tamed. But the moment they rose, the moment they dared to take shape, his jealousy consumed him. The Titans had grown. They stood tall, their power undeniable, their hands shaping mountains, their voices strong enough to shake the seas. Uranus watched them with something he never spoke aloud, something hidden in the glint of his eternal gaze. Fear. Not all his children were Titans. Not all of Gaia's offspring were sculpted from beauty and power. Some came forth screaming, grotesque, their very existence an offense to the order Uranus demanded. The Cyclopes, 3 giants with a single, unblinking eye. They burned with the fire of creation, hands capable of shaping forces not even the gods could understand. They were raw, untamed, dangerous. Uranus hated them. And then came the Hecatoncheias, abominations in his eyes. 100 arms, 50 faces, creatures too monstrous for even the Titans to understand. They were chaos, and Uranus despised chaos. So he made a choice. He would not let them exist. One by one, he took them. His own children, his own blood. He seized them in the dead of night, before they could rise, before they could fight back. They screamed, oh, how they screamed, as he dragged them down, 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 locking them away in the abyss of Tartarus. Gaia felt it. She felt everything. Their pain seared through her like fire, their cries sank into her skin like poison. She begged him to stop. He did not listen. He did not care. His only concern was his throne, his dominion, his power. And the Titans watched. Cronus most of all. He stood silent as his brothers were stolen. He heard the cries, the wailing, the terror, and something inside him hardened. Uranus had ruled for too long. The sky thought himself untouchable, his grip eternal. But no throne lasts forever. No tyrant stands unchallenged. Gaia, broken and grieving, came to him. Her whispers wrapped around him like the roots of an ancient tree, her sorrow bleeding into rage. She told him of a sickle forged in darkness, a blade sharpened by fury itself. She placed it in his hands, cold and heavy, a promise made of iron and vengeance. And Cronus waited. The sky was endless. The sky was untouchable. But even the sky had to fall sometime. So when Uranus came once more, spreading himself across Gaia's body, stretching over the earth as he always had, Cronus struck. The blade flashed, quick as a viper, sharp as the wrath of a god betrayed. It cut through the sky, through flesh not meant to bleed, through power thought to be eternal. Uranus screamed. A sound that cracked the very bones of the world, a howl that sent stars scattering in terror. His own son had betrayed him. Cronus did not stop. He cut again. And again. And again. Until Uranus was no longer whole. Until his blood rained down upon the earth, staining the land, filling the oceans, creating something new. From his agony, beings of vengeance were born, furies with wings like shadows and eyes that burned with the rage of the fallen. Uranus fled. Wounded, broken, defeated. The sky peeled away, retreating to the farthest reaches of existence, never again to lay his hands upon the earth. But his voice, his curse, remained. He spat words that shook the air, that cut deeper than any blade. You think you have won. But you will fall as I have fallen. Your own son will destroy you. Your own blood will cast you down. Cronus listened. And for the first time in his existence, he felt fear. The sky no longer bled. For the first time since the birth of the world, the heavens were silent. No voice thundered from above. No unseen hands reached down to strangle life before it could rise. The sky had been torn open, its tyrant banished, his severed flesh scattered like dying stars. And in his place stood Cronus. The blade was still wet in his hands. His father's scream still echoed in his mind. He had ripped power from the heavens itself, carved it free with the same cold steel that now gleamed in the light of a world reborn. He had won. He should have felt something. Triumph. Relief. Something. Instead, the silence pressed in. Thick. Heavy. Unforgiving. Then, Gaia spoke. Her voice rose from the earth itself, from the roots that clawed deep, from the rivers that had never known stillness. She did not weep for Uranus. But she did not rejoice, either. Rule well, my son, she whispered, her voice an exhale through the endless wind. Or you will meet his fate. Cronus did not answer. He simply lifted the blade one last time, and cast it away. He did not need it anymore. The world was his. The Titans rose in his wake, their names now heavy with power, with purpose. They had been born in shadow, raised beneath the crushing sky, their strength stifled by their father's fear. But now? Now, they ruled. Hyperion lifted the sun into the sky, its golden light spilling across the land for the first time, unchained, unchallenged. Theia adorned it with a brilliance that made the heavens shine. Oceanus stretched his hands, and the waters rushed to meet him, spilling into valleys, filling the void with the breath of tides. Tessis followed, pulling rivers from the bones of the earth, shaping them with a touch. Mnemosyne wove the first strands of memory, binding moments to time itself so nothing would be lost again. Coeus and Phoebe pulled the stars into their hands, setting them alight with prophecy and silver fire. Rhea walked across the land, and everywhere her feet touched, life bloomed. And Cronus watched. He watched as the world took shape beneath his reign, watched as the Titans spread their hands across creation. He sat upon his throne, carved from the bones of forgotten things, and ruled from a seat that had never belonged to another. The Golden Age had begun. There was no hunger. No war. No cruelty. The earth was full, and its people knew only abundance. Mortals were born into a world without suffering, their hands never knowing chains, their hearts never tainted by fear. The Titans walked among them, not as gods, not as distant figures of worship, but as rulers, as guides, as kin. For the first time, the world flourished. And yet, in the quiet hours, when the sun sank behind the mountains and the stars whispered secrets too old to be spoken, Cronus remembered. "You think you have won." His father's voice slithered through the cracks in his mind, curling around his thoughts like roots tightening around stone. "But you will fall as I have fallen." He told himself it was nothing. He had broken the sky. He had torn the old world apart and built a new one from its bones. He was not Uranus. He was not weak. And yet, the shadows stretched longer than they should have. The night air carried whispers that had no mouths to speak them. And Rhea, his queen, his wife, his anchor, watched him with eyes that saw too much. He did not ask her what she saw. He already knew. The fire burned without flame. Thick smoke coiled from the blackened earth, twisting into the air like whispering hands, reaching, clawing. The heat did not flicker. It did not crackle. It simply was an eternal smolder, a wound in the world itself. No wind could scatter it. No water could quench it. In the center of this cursed place stood her. The Oracle. Eyes blank, mouth unmoving, yet her voice filled the air, weaving through the silence like a serpent slithering through the cracks of a tomb. "He will come." Cronus did not breathe. He stood motionless, his presence a shadow against the churning mist, golden and terrible. He had come for answers, for a whisper of reassurance, for certainty. What he had found was a curse shaped into words. "He will be born of you, yet he will be your end." The smoke thickened. It curled around his throat, his wrists, his crown. The weight of those words pressed into him, digging into his flesh like unseen claws. "Your sun will rise, as you rose. Your sun will strike, as you struck. And you, the king of Titans, will be nothing but a name whispered in fear and scorn." The oracle's voice was not hers. It was older. Something buried in the bones of the world, something that had waited, that had known. "You will not stop it. You will not escape it. The sky has fallen once. It will fall again." The silence that followed was unnatural. The kind that made the heart ache to hear something, anything, to break its suffocating grip. But there was only silence. Cronus exhaled, slow and steady, like a beast keeping its hunger at bay. He did not ask questions. He did not demand more. He did not need more. The prophecy was clear. His own blood would betray him. His own son would rise. His throne, his reign, his power, stolen, just as he had stolen it from his father. The gods did not grant warnings. They delivered fates. His jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists as the shadows danced across his skin. This was what Uranus had feared. This was what had driven him to bury his own children alive, to crush them beneath the weight of the world itself. Cronus had called it tyranny. And yet, he could feel it now. The sickening, twisting dread that clawed at his ribs, that whispered in the back of his mind. The future was moving, inevitable as the tide. He turned away from the oracle, the ground seething beneath his feet, his heartbeat a drum of war pounding through his skull. The prophecy was spoken. The doom was written. And Cronus had already made his decision. No child of his would be allowed to rise. The child screamed. A wail so raw, so small, so fragile, and yet it carried the weight of something ancient, something destined. The sound cracked through the air, cutting into the silence, into the waiting, into the unspoken horror of what was about to happen. Cronus stared at the infant in Rhea's arms. His child. His flesh. His blood. His future. And his doom. The prophecy whispered in his skull like a second heartbeat. It will rise. It will strike. It will end you. His fingers twitched, nails pressing against his palm. It is only a child. A breath, a heartbeat, a small trembling body wrapped in cloth. It did not have the strength to lift its own head, let alone strike him down. And yet, Cronus did not see an infant. He saw a blade pressed to his throat. His father's final scream had never left him. It still writhed beneath his skin, slithered through his veins, cold and sharp. You will fall as I have fallen. No. No. He would not be weak. Rhea's fingers tightened around the child, her knuckles white. She had seen the change in him. The shift. The decision that had solidified in his bones. Cronus. Her voice was steady, but her breath hitched. He is ours. He stepped forward. Her grip turned iron. Do not. The silence between them shook. The kind of silence that stretched over an open grave. The kind that meant one of them had to break, had to shatter first. Rhea's eyes burned into him. Searching. Begging. But she already knew. Cronus reached out. She pulled away, but he was faster. Fingers closed around the small, writhing body. The warmth of his son bled into his skin. Tiny hands flailed, grasping at nothing. Innocent. Helpless. He should not have looked. But he did. And for the smallest fraction of a moment, something cracked. A flicker. A hesitation. A wound not yet made. Then, he swallowed. The warmth vanished. The weight in his hands was gone. His stomach clenched, twisted, screamed, but it did not break. It was done. The silence returned. But it was different now. It pressed into the walls, into the floor, into the hollow that had been left behind. Rhea had not moved. Had not breathed. Her face was stone, but her eyes burned. Cronus turned away before he could see what lay behind them. But he already knew. And when the second child was born, it did not matter how she wept, how she screamed. He swallowed that one, too. And the next. And the next. And the next. Until the prophecy was nothing but a fading whisper buried beneath his ribs. The infant did not cry. Rhea held her breath, her body rigid, her heart a hammer against her ribs. The air itself had gone still, as if the world knew what was at stake. She dared not move. Not yet. Cronus was near. The child stirred in her arms, a small shift, a mere whisper of life, but even that felt too loud. Too dangerous. She tightened her grip, pressing the warmth of him against her chest, silently pleading with the fates to grant her just a little more time. Footsteps. A shadow stretched across the threshold, long and deliberate. She did not look up. She could not. Because she knew what she would see. The hunger. The cold, calculating weight of his eyes. The decision already made. The moment stretched, tight as a garrote around her throat. Then, in a voice carved from stone, the child. It was not a request. It never was. She lifted her head, every muscle burning, breaking, just to meet his gaze. He stood before her, a towering monolith of power, a god who had swallowed fate itself. The Titan King. The Devourer. Her husband. Her executioner. She forced herself to breathe. And then, she lied. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped the bundle, revealing the small, swaddled weight inside. A stone. Wrapped in cloth, nestled against her warmth, just heavy enough to fool him. She felt the universe tighten around them, felt the moment teeter on the edge of oblivion. Would he see it? Would he sense the deception curdling in the air between them? Cronus reached forward. She could not stop him. The stone left her hands, cradled now in his, a false son, a false fate. Her breath caught. Then, without pause, without hesitation, he swallowed. The moment snapped. The prophecy was cheated. The child still lived. She wanted to scream, to weep, to shatter into 1,000 trembling pieces, but there was no time. She turned, steps swift, silent, mercilessly controlled as she disappeared into the night, into the waiting dark. She did not stop. Not when the cold bit through her skin. Not when the wind howled warnings into her ears. She did not stop until she reached the hidden cave. Until she placed her son into the hands of the nymphs. Until she whispered the only thing that mattered. Keep him safe. And the night swallowed them whole. The storm raged like a living thing. Lightning slashed the sky in violent cracks, splitting the heavens apart, revealing glimpses of the abyss beyond. Wind screamed through the cliffs, carrying the voices of gods yet to rise, of battles yet to be fought. The earth trembled beneath its own future. And in the heart of it all, he stood. A boy, yet something more. Something impossible. Something fated. Rain pounded his bare skin, ran down his arms in rivulets, soaked the wild mane of hair that clung to his face. He did not shiver. He did not retreat. He watched. A single bolt of lightning burst from the sky, raw and merciless, hurling itself toward him like the hand of an angry god. He did not move. Thunder exploded. The light consumed him. But he did not burn. He held out his hand. And when the light faded, when the sky blinked in shock, the fire lived in his palm. A child's hand. A titan's defiance. A god's birthright. Metis watched from the shadows. She had seen the signs before. Power awakening in the young. Some crumbled beneath it. Some ran from it. Some wielded it as a weapon before they understood the weight of the blade. But this boy did not fear it. He did not weep from the agony of its touch. He did not scream beneath the weight of it. He let it sink into him, coil around his bones, settle behind his ribs like a caged storm waiting for release. Metis stepped forward, her presence slicing through the night like a whisper wrapped in steel. "What do you feel?" The boy turned. And she saw it. The war already burning in his eyes. The training began before dawn. It did not end when the sun fell. He learned with bruised hands and bloody lips, his body beaten into strength, his mind sharpened into something lethal. Metis did not go easy on him. She was wisdom itself, born before the world had a name, the force that had whispered into the ears of kings and watched them crumble beneath their own arrogance. She would not raise a fool. So she broke him. Again and again. Forced him to fight with nothing but his instincts when his body had nothing left to give. Forced him to think beyond the moment, to see the battlefield in his mind before the first strike was thrown. She drove him into the mountains, where the air was thin and merciless, where the silence screamed louder than words. She let him face the creatures that lurked in the caves, the ones with eyes like dying stars, the ones who knew what he was meant to be and feared it. He did not falter. Every challenge, every lesson carved into his soul, building the god that would one day shake the heavens. The storm inside him grew. Waiting. The air in the great hall was thick, heavy, poisoned with the weight of what was about to happen. Torches burned low, their flames flickering in the draught that slithered through the cracks of Cronus' monstrous palace. Shadows stretched and curled against the stone, whispering secrets, tasting the blood yet to be spilled. And at the heart of it all, Zeus stood. The time had come. Across the chamber, the Titan king loomed. His throne of obsidian sat like a wound in the belly of the world, black and unyielding. His golden eyes, once filled with fire and unchecked power, were dull with arrogance, with the belief that he was eternal, untouchable. He had swallowed his own children. Stolen their futures before they could take their first breaths. Locked them away inside the prison of his own flesh. And he thought that was the end of it. But now, the storm had come for him. Zeus stepped forward. His footsteps echoed against the cold stone, each one a crack in the old order, a toll of the bell that would shatter the age of Titans. His blood boiled with wrath, with the screams of the siblings trapped in the abyss of his father's gut. He could hear them. Muffled cries. Distant wails. The ghosts of stolen lives. His hands curled into fists. The air crackled around him. The scent of ozone filled the chamber. Cronus laughed. A hollow, empty sound. Mocking. You think you can stand before me? His voice was thunder without lightning, an echo of the past refusing to accept its death. You, who were nothing but a scrap of flesh hidden away like a rat. He leaned forward, the weight of eons pressing against his smirk. You are alone, boy. Zeus smiled. And the world shattered. Lightning exploded from his hands, raw, blinding, divine. The throne room split apart, cracks racing up the pillars, the ceiling trembling beneath the fury. The torches died in an instant, their feeble light no match for the fire Zeus had become. Cronus roared, but it was not the roar of a king. It was something else. Something ugly. Something afraid. Zeus struck again. Not with hesitation. Not with mercy. He had been forged in the fire of gods and ghosts, raised in the knowledge that power only meant something if it was taken back from the hands of tyrants. Cronus staggered. And then, the sickness came. His body lurched forward. He gripped his stomach, muscles seizing, his throat convulsing. His breath came ragged and sharp, strangled by something clawing its way up from the abyss inside him. He gasped, choked, then retched. The first body hit the floor. A wet gasp. A cry, raw and disoriented, reborn in pain and stolen time. A figure collapsed onto the stone, limbs weak, body trembling, but alive. Hera. Then another. Poseidon. One by one, they emerged. Hades, soaked in bile, eyes burning with something dark and vengeful. Demeter, coughing, dragging herself upright, her breath coming in short, desperate bursts. Hestia, barely able to stand, but her hands already seeking her siblings, the first flicker of warmth in a place of ruin. And Cronus, the Titan king, collapsed. His body wrecked by the weight of his own sins. His mouth still dripping with the evidence of his failure. Zeus stood over him, his breath steady, his hand still crackling with the storm's rage. His siblings, his army, rose beside him. The world had shifted. The balance had shattered. And the war for Olympus had just begun. The air in Tartarus was thick with rotten old rage, the stench of something buried alive but never allowed to die. It pressed against the skin, wormed into the lungs, coated the tongue with the taste of something ancient and unspeakably wrong. No god belonged here. But Zeus stood in the darkness anyway. The walls of the underworld prison loomed around him, pulsing with the agony of those trapped inside. Chains groaned. Stones wept dust. The weight of eternity crushed the very air. But in the heart of this abyss, something stirred. Something enormous. Something angry. A growl, low and guttural, rolled through the blackness. A tremor answered it, then another, until the ground itself seemed to shudder in recognition. They knew he was here. Zeus stepped forward. His breath burned in his throat, his body tensed for what was to come. And then, they rose. The Hecaton chairs. 50 heads, 100 arms, each limb rippling with unnatural strength. Monsters made of fury and chains. Their eyes, all of them, gleamed in the dark, mad with confinement, rabid with vengeance. Their voices, when they spoke, rumbled through the bones of the earth itself. You are not one of us, Olympian. The words dragged through the air like stones grinding together. Why should we not tear you apart? Zeus did not flinch. He met their rage with his own, let it burn bright, let it set the shadows to trembling. Because I am here to break your chains. Silence. For a moment, only the ragged sound of their breathing filled the void. Fingers twitched. Muscles coiled. Then, laughter. It was a sick thing, bitter and raw, the sound of souls that had been fed nothing but torment. A joke? A lie? Another god promising salvation. But Zeus did not move. Did not yield. Lightning crackled at his fingertips, coiling up his arms, pulsing with something pure and absolute. Power rippled outward, a storm taking shape in the heart of the pit. The air changed. Became electric. Became real. And in that moment, the laughter died. The hecatoncheirs leaned forward, their many eyes narrowing, their 100 fists clenching. The weight of their gaze pressed against him, measuring, testing. And then, in a voice like a landslide, one of them spoke. Break them. Zeus raised his hand. Thunder roared. The chains shattered. The scream that followed was not one of pain, it was a battle cry, raw and earth-shaking. The hecatoncheirs rose to their full, impossible height, their limbs uncoiling, their muscles flexing for the first time in an age. The walls of Tartarus trembled. The old gods, wherever they were, felt the shift. Zeus turned. He was not done. Through the crumbling ruin of the prison, through the wailing echoes of the Forsaken, he strode deeper, seeking the others. The Cyclopes. They were buried in the black, their mighty bodies hunched, their single, burning eyes filled with the ghosts of betrayal. Once, they had forged weapons for the Titans. Once, they had been creators of wonders. But Cronus had feared them, had feared what their hands might make against him. And so, he had thrown them into the dark. Forgotten them. Left them to rot. Zeus found them shackled in silence, their wrists raw, their backs bent. But when he stepped before them, they did not beg. Did not curse. They simply stared, their enormous chests rising and falling with slow, careful breaths. Who are you? One rumbled. The one who will end Cronus, Zeus said. A slow, measured inhale. A glance exchanged between them, unreadable in its depth. Then, a shift. Prove it. Zeus knelt. And unchained them. The air changed again. The ground hummed. The Cyclopes straightened, stretched their enormous arms, flexed fingers that had forgotten freedom. And in that moment, something ignited behind their single, golden eyes, purpose. We will forge for you, they said. We will shape the weapons that will bring the Titans to their knees. Zeus nodded. They were ready. When he emerged from Tartarus, he did not come alone. The war had begun. The wind carried a scent of something wrong. A silence stretched over the land, not the silence of peace, but of something coiled tight, waiting to strike. The sky had darkened, though no storm had come. The earth held its breath. Something was about to break. On Olympus, the air thrummed with power. Sparks leapt from Zeus' skin, his hands clenched at his sides as he gazed down at the world that would soon be swallowed by war. It was inevitable now. Words had been spoken, alliances forged, chains broken. The Titans would not stand for it. Cronus would not stand for it. In the halls of the old gods, the ground quaked beneath the weight of their gathering. The Olympians were no longer shadows in the corners of the world. They had made themselves known. The whispers of their growing strength had reached the ears of the Titans, and with each passing day, the murmurs turned to growls, the growls to roars. The sky itself seemed to tremble with anticipation. Cronus stood at the edge of the highest peak of Mount Olympus, looking toward Olympus. His father had once ruled from this very place. Uranus, the sky itself, had thought himself untouchable, until Cronus' sickle carved through the heavens and ended him. And now, the same prophecy that had haunted Uranus clung to Cronus like a shadow. Your son will destroy you. The words called in his mind, wrapping around his thoughts like serpents, digging into his flesh with invisible fangs. He gritted his teeth. His fingers curled into fists. No. He would not fall as his father had. He had swallowed his children, smothered the prophecy in their absence, and yet, they lived. Zeus lived. And worse, he was no longer a child hiding in the corners of the world. He was coming. A growl rumbled in Cronus' throat, and the titans around him stirred. They felt it too, the shift in the air, the tension creeping into the bones of the earth. Hyperion, his golden eyes burning with something unreadable, flexed his hands at his sides. Cronus stood still, calculating, his mind a storm behind his impassive face. Creos, Iapetus, and Oceanus loomed behind them, old gods with power thick in their veins, forged in the raw chaos of creation itself. Rhea stood apart. She had not spoken since the truth had been revealed, since Cronus had learned of her treachery, of the child she had stolen away to grow into his downfall. She did not tremble. She met his gaze with something cold and unyielding. She had already chosen her side. Cronus turned from her. She was nothing now. He raised his hand, and the sky above Mount Olympus burned red. Lightning cracked through the clouds, the earth groaning beneath the weight of the power gathering above. The Titans watched, their expressions dark, waiting for their king to speak. They believe they're gods. His voice rolled through the mountains, a promise, a curse. They believe they can rise against us. That they can take what is ours. His fingers curled, the very air bending to his will. They will learn. They will suffer. And they will fall. The Titans roared. The war had already begun. And on Olympus, Zeus smiled. The sky shattered. A silence had gripped the world, stretched too thin, too tight, trembling like the moment before a storm breaks apart the heavens. And then, it snapped. A bolt of lightning tore through the clouds, splitting them open with a sound that cracked through the marrow of the earth. The war had begun. Zeus stood at the front, his body thrumming with raw, electric power, his golden eyes locked on the mountain ahead. Mount Olympus, the fortress of the Titans, loomed like a beast of stone and shadow. His father was waiting. The old gods had gathered, their rage a force of its own, thickening the air with something suffocating, something ancient. The ground beneath Zeus' feet trembled, not from fear, but from fury. Behind him, his siblings were ready. Hades, silent and cold, his fingers twitching at his side, the promise of death curling around his hands like mist. Poseidon, his breath slow, steady, controlled, but his sea-blue eyes burned with something violent. Beside them stood the allies they had gathered, the creatures who had once been shackled, now free. The Hecatoncheirs, the Cyclopes, monsters, some whispered. Weapons, Zeus called them. Across the battlefield, the Titans stood, unmoving. Massive. Unbreakable. Gods of an age before time had learned to count itself. Hyperion, golden and wrathful, his very presence a burning wound in the air. Creos, the silent storm on the horizon, waiting for the moment to strike. Iapetus, the spear in Cronus' hand, his rage held tight, a blade waiting to carve through the flesh of the new gods. And Cronus himself, the god who had swallowed his own blood, his own children, and thought himself untouchable. Zeus stepped forward. The wind curled around him, whispering threats, promises, history itself trembling at the edge of the coming storm. This was it. There would be no second chances, no whispered words in the dark, no escape. Only war. Only victory or annihilation. Cronus raised his hand. The sky roared. Then, chaos. Hyperion moved first, a golden blur, a streak of burning light that seared the air, tearing toward the heart of the Olympians. But Zeus was ready. His hand shot forward, and the heavens obeyed, a lightning screamed from his palms, raw and blinding, colliding with Hyperion in a burst of fire and fury. The force of it sent shockwaves through the battlefield, splitting the ground, hurling bodies into the air like dead leaves in a storm. And then they all fell into the madness. Poseidon surged forward, a war cry ripping from his throat as the oceans themselves answered. Water erupted from the earth, towering waves crashing down with impossible force, sweeping titans and beasts alike into their grasp. But the titans would not drown. Oceanus met him in a clash of fury, the seas twisting in on themselves as the gods of water turned their rage against each other, the waves turning dark with war. Hades moved like a shadow. Silent. Ruthless. unseen until it was too late. The ground split open at his command, and the scent of death filled the battlefield as skeletal hands clawed free from the underworld, grasping at Titan ankles, dragging, tearing, pulling them down into the depths below. He did not speak. He did not need to. His war was fought in silence, in the places unseen. The Hecatoncheirs tore through the battlefield, their 100 hands moving too fast to track, their rage unleashed after centuries of imprisonment. They had been chained beneath the world, forgotten, discarded, but now they would break the gods who had caged them. Zeus saw none of it. His eyes were on Cronus. His father stood still, unmoving, watching the war erupt around him as if it were nothing more than dust in the wind. He was waiting. Waiting for Zeus to come to him. Waiting for the moment they would meet, not as father and son, not as ruler and rebel, but as gods who had been fated to destroy each other. Zeus did not hesitate. His body burned with power, the storm wrapped around him like armor, his fingers curled into fists of lightning. He surged forward, and Cronus moved. The sky turned black. A force unlike anything Zeus had ever known crashed into him, sent him spiraling, sent the world itself reeling. He hit the ground hard, the impact shattering the stone beneath him. The breath tore from his lungs. The taste of blood filled his mouth. Cronus was fast. Faster than anything should have been. Before Zeus could rise, his father was upon him. A hand closed around his throat, lifting him effortlessly from the ruined earth. This was the god who had torn his own father from the heavens. The god who had ruled an age of monsters and titans, who had swallowed gods whole. His grip was iron, his eyes dark as the abyss itself. You were never meant to win this. Cronus' voice was quiet, but it cut through the battle, through the screams and the thunder and the breaking of the world. Zeus could feel it, the crushing weight of his father's power, the strength that had held the cosmos in balance, the force that had devoured the old gods before him. But Zeus was not a child anymore. He was not a babe hidden away in a cave. He was not a whisper of rebellion. He was the storm. His fingers sparked. Lightning burned through Cronus' grip. The sky turned white. The air ignited. The power Zeus had been holding back, waiting, unleashed. Cronus staggered. For the first time, his eyes widened. Zeus struck. The force of it tore the heavens apart. The sky was torn between them. Two mountains, two thrones, two gods that refused to kneel. The storm writhed between them, twisting in the cold wind, uncertain of which peak to serve. Mount Olympus and Mount Arthries, two beasts staring across the battlefield, waiting for war to finish what time had only started. Arthries stood first, its black stone jagged and cruel, carved from the bones of a world that had learned to fear the Titans. It loomed like a wound against the sky, its peaks shadowed, its valleys bleeding smoke. Cronus had made his throne here. The mountain did not welcome kings, it swallowed them, devoured them whole, let their power seep into its roots like poison. It was an empire built on old gods and old blood, a fortress where the past refused to die. But across the sky, a new mountain had risen. Olympus was young. Defiant. Its peaks had not yet grown heavy with age, its stone had not yet learned the weight of history, but it burned with something older than time itself. Zeus had claimed it not with conquest, not with inheritance, but with war. It was his. And the mountain knew it. The winds howled through its cliffs, its rivers ran clear, but beneath the beauty, there was something watching. Waiting. The mountain knew what it had been built for. Olympus had been born for battle. Between them, the land rotted. Lightning clawed at the sky, fire burned in the distance, and the rivers ran thick with the dust of an earth too afraid to breathe. This was no ordinary war. This was not just gods against gods. This was a world caught between the hands of two rival thrones. Every stone cracked beneath the weight of them, every tree twisted toward the heavens, reaching for salvation that would never come. Arthries was still. A fortress frozen in the shadow of its own past. But Olympus was moving. From the base of the new mountain, the gods gathered. Hades, wrapped in darkness, the weight of the underworld in his gaze. Poseidon, his hands curled into fists, the pull of the ocean threading through his veins. Hera, her eyes sharper than daggers, her fury the kind that burned colder than ice. Demeter, Persephone, Hestia, gods who had been swallowed, spat out, reforged in vengeance. And Zeus. Zeus stood above them, lightning writhing in his hands. He did not speak. He did not need to. The air itself pulsed with his presence. The wind carried his fury, the mountains trembled at his breath. He had spent his life waiting for this war. He had spent his childhood preparing for this moment. And now, there was only one thing left to do. From across the battlefield, the mountain of the Titans roared. A shudder rolled through the sky, and the blackened cliffs of Arthries began to move. The Titans were coming. Hyperion, his body glowing with fire, his hands carved from the core of the sun itself. Coeus, his eyes burning with knowledge too vast for mortal minds. Crius, his fury a storm of its own. Iapetus, his spear forged from the very bones of the world. And Cronus. Cronus did not rush forward. He did not charge. He stood on the peak of Arthries, watching, waiting, unshaken by the storm tearing through the heavens. He had ruled for too long to be afraid. He had devoured his own children, crushed his enemies beneath the weight of time itself, built his empire in a world where gods fell silent beneath his shadow. But something had changed. The world was not silent anymore. It was screaming. The mountains stared at each other across the battlefield, waiting for the war to begin, waiting for the first strike that would set the earth itself ablaze. This was not just war. This was the tearing of an era, the shattering of a reign that had stood for too long, the first breath of something new clawing its way into existence. Olympus was ready. Arthries was waiting. And the storm, caught between them, did not know where to go. The firelight flickered against the cave walls, throwing jagged shadows that twisted and stretched like silent, watching ghosts. Prometheus stood near the flames, his arms crossed, his gaze dark. Outside, the world rumbled, the whisper of a war that had not yet begun but was already shaking the bones of the earth. The choice lay between them, unspoken, suffocating. Epimetheus shifted, his breath uneven, his fingers tracing the stone beside him. He had never been good at silence. His thoughts were slower, softer, prone to bending under the weight of the moment. And now, the moment was pressing down with the force of the heavens themselves. The world is about to tear itself apart, Prometheus murmured. The firelight made his face sharper, his eyes hollowed by something heavier than fear. You hear it, don't you? The wind scream. The rivers hesitate. They know what's coming. Epimetheus swallowed hard. He did hear it. The unnatural stillness before the first strike, the quiet dread sinking into the marrow of the land. A war between titans and gods. A war between their own blood. Our father stands with Cronus, Epimetheus whispered. Our brothers stand with Cronus. Prometheus exhaled, slow and measured, but his hands curled into fists. Our father is a fool, he said, voice cold as stone. Our brothers are blind. They clutch at old thrones, old gods, old power rotting beneath the weight of its own arrogance. He turned, fixing Epimetheus with a stare that burned hotter than the fire. Tell me you don't see it. Epimetheus hesitated. He had seen it. The cracks in the old order. The way Cronus clung to his reign like a dying beast refusing to bleed. The way Zeus did not bow. The way the sky itself recoiled from what was coming. But knowing was not the same as choosing. They are our family, Epimetheus said. His voice cracked on the word. He hated that it cracked. Prometheus laughed, but there was no joy in it. Only something sharp, bitter, something that tasted like regret before it had even fully formed. They were our family the day Cronus devoured his own children. They were our family when Rhea wept, when she hid Zeus away to keep him from being swallowed whole. His jaw tightened. Tell me, brother, how much blood must stain our hands before you realize we were never their family at all? The word struck like a blade. Epimetheus flinched. Prometheus took a step forward, his voice lower now, but not softer. Never softer. Cronus rules with fear. With silence. With the weight of time pressing down, grinding everything into dust. Look at the world, Epimetheus. His fingers flexed at his sides. It is dying under his reign. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, rattling through the valley like a wounded thing. Epimetheus looked at the fire. The flames twisted, curling upon themselves, rising higher, as if reaching for something just beyond their grasp. Fire was movement. Fire was change. Fire could burn, but it could also create. He clenched his jaw. And if we choose the other side, he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Prometheus did not blink. Then we choose to build, not destroy. His voice carried the weight of the sky itself. We choose a future that is more than a throne built on fear. We choose to defy those who would see the world suffocate under their rule. A breath. A heartbeat. A choice waiting to be made. Epimetheus closed his eyes. Somewhere, in the distance, thunder rumbled. The air was thick with the scent of iron and storm. Atlas stood at the edge of the great precipice, his massive frame unyielding against the howling winds that tore through the Titan stronghold. Below him, the earth trembled, shifting restlessly like a beast that knew blood would soon soak its skin. He did not flinch. He did not blink. He had been forged for this moment. Behind him, the Titan generals stood in silence, their forms carved from sheer will, their faces as unreadable as the heavens before a strike of lightning. Cronus, his mind sharper than any blade, hands clasped behind his back. Hyperion, his very presence like a burning sun, a fire that could consume if left unchecked. Iapetus, the war machine, a creature of raw force and merciless execution. And Cronus had placed them under his command. Atlas exhaled, his breath slow, measured. The weight of expectation pressed upon his shoulders, but it did not bow him. He had never been one to bow. The Olympians move, Cronus murmured. His voice was calm, but there was something coiled beneath it, something that spoke of calculations running like rivers through his mind. Their numbers grow. Their alliances strengthen. Atlas did not turn. His gaze was fixed on the battlefield that did not yet exist but already felt soaked in fate. Let them. Hyperion let out a low, crackling laugh. It sounded like fire consuming wood. You speak as if you long for the bloodshed. Atlas finally turned, slow and deliberate. His eyes burned with something colder than war. It is not longing, he said, his voice steady as the mountains. It is inevitability. Silence. The kind that cuts deeper than words. Iapetus shifted, fingers drumming against the pommel of his blade. Always restless. Always waiting for the command to break things apart. Cronus expects us to lead the charge, he said. To break the Olympians before they ever touch the heart of our threes. Atlas nodded. He had known this long before Cronus had spoken the words. Because Atlas had been born to bear the weight of things others feared to carry. Cronus' eyes narrowed. And do you believe we can? A pause. A breath. The world itself seemed to hold still for his answer. Yes. Atlas did not hesitate. We are Titans. His gaze swept across them, unwavering, unshaken. We were here before them. We built this world before they even took their first breath. We are the foundation upon which everything stands. His fingers curled into fists. And we will not fall. The wind screamed through the valley below. Hyperion's lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. More teeth than joy. Then let them come. Iapetus smirked, rolling his shoulders, as if already hearing the clash of weapons in his mind. Let them break themselves against us. Atlas turned back to the storm that raged ahead, eyes fixed on the shifting sky. The war was not yet upon them. But it would be. And when it came, Atlas would be there to meet it. Unshaken. Unbowed. Unbreakable. The sky did not break. It was torn apart. A flash, searing, blinding, merciless. White fire ripped through the heavens. For a moment, there was silence, the kind that devours breath, that strangles thought. Then, the world shuddered. The ground convulsed as if in agony. Trees twisted into flame. Mountains groaned under the weight of something unthinkable. The air itself burned, laced with the raw scent of scorched earth and the iron tang of destruction. And at the center of it all, he stood. Zeus. His body was wreathed in light, his skin kissed by the storm, his eyes molten gold. The weapon had chosen him. The first bolt still sizzled in his grasp, tendrils of lightning curling around his fingers like living things, eager, restless, hungry. His lips parted, not in a battle cry, not in anger, but in understanding. This was not mere power. This was dominion. The Titan saw it. Atlas, his colossal form rooted like an immovable pillar, felt something in his chest tighten, a crack, small but real. For the first time, uncertainty slid like a blade between his ribs. Hyperion's eternal flames flickered, wavering against the light that now rivaled the sun itself. Even Coeus, ever calculating, narrowed his eyes in quiet recognition. The battlefield had changed. Zeus raised his hand. And the sky obeyed. Another bolt. A second wound carved into the firmament. It did not fall, it struck. Straight through the heart of the battlefield. The earth detonated, rock and soil and bodies hurled into the air as if the land itself had rejected them. The roar of the explosion swallowed the screams. The Olympians did not falter. Ar surged forward, his war cry a raw, primal thing. Poseidon's trident pulsed with the fury of a rising tide. Even Hades, ever shadowed, stood unflinching, his dark gaze locked onto the Titans with something sharper than vengeance. They had always fought. They had always believed. But now? Now, they knew they would win. Lightning did not merely wound. It did not merely kill. It annihilated. Titans who had stood for centuries, who had never known fear, now staggered beneath the relentless assault. Flesh burned. Armor melted. Weapons were ripped from hands as thunder roared so loud it became something more than sound, something that shook the marrow of the gods themselves. Zeus did not stop. He could not. This was his ascension. Every strike remade the battlefield in his image, bending the laws of war, of existence, to his will. He was no longer just another Olympian, another son of Cronus clawing for survival. He was the storm. Atlas saw the future in that blinding light. Not in words, not in visions, but in certainty. The Titans had ruled for eons, their strength absolute, their dominion unchallenged. But this? This was the beginning of the end. And Zeus, lightning in his veins, fire in his grip, was the end itself. The ocean did not stir. It convulsed. A tremor rippled through the abyss, a shuddering exhale from something vast and angry. The darkness of the deep thickened, pressing down like an unseen hand, suffocating, watching. For a moment, all was still. Then, the water roared. Poseidon had arrived. His trident struck the sea floor, and the silence shattered. A single crack in the bed of the world, spreading like veins of fire, until the weight of the ocean above it collapsed. Waves that had slumbered for centuries awoke in fury. They reared up, black and monstrous, swallowing the sky, drowning the light. The battlefield shifted, not land, not sky, but the abyss itself. Titans of the sea rose from their trenches, their eyes reflecting the endless void of the ocean's depths. Cato's serpentine body coiled through the currents, her scales catching the dying flickers of sunlight. Forces, his voice like the groan of shifting tectonic plates, called his legions forward, beasts that had never known the surface, creatures that fed on nightmares and silence. They had never been tamed. They had never needed to be. But Poseidon was no stranger to the wildness of the sea. He was its master. The moment his hand clenched around the haft of his trident, the entire ocean seemed to breathe with him. And then it obeyed. The first strike was not seen. It was felt. Currents shifted, the crushing weight of the water bending under an unseen force. A whirlpool, vast and ravenous, opened its mouth. Ships, Titan war vessels of impossible size, were seized like driftwood, their massive hulls splintering with a sound that never reached the surface. Sailors did not scream. They did not have time. The ocean swallowed them whole. The battle had begun. Poseidon moved through the chaos like a storm given form. His body cut through the depths, muscles coiling with each pulse of water around him. The sea bent at his will, a creature tamed by its creator. Every motion sent waves crashing into enemy forces, currents twisting into unseen hands that dragged titans into the abyss. Cato struck first. Her fangs, jagged like sunken wreckage, lunged for Poseidon's throat. She was ancient, bound to the ocean before the gods had names. Her body moved with the force of a tidal wave, coiling, constricting, crushing. Poseidon did not yield. His trident thrust forward, not with desperation but with certainty. The golden prongs split the water, driving straight into flesh. Cato howled, her cry rippling through the water, shattering coral, summoning terror. Blood, a thick, dark cloud, billowed through the waves, staining them black. The ocean did not stop. Another surge, a wall of water so vast it seemed to split the sea in two, collided with the Titan fleet. The ships that had managed to escape the whirlpool found themselves at the mercy of Poseidon's fury. Wood groaned, beams snapped, entire decks vanished beneath the waves. Those who clung to the wreckage were dragged below by hands they could not see, by creatures that had been waiting, patient, for this moment. Forces saw it. And for the first time, he hesitated. Poseidon turned his gaze on him. The sea curled around the god, the weight of it pressing, closing, daring him to resist. His fingers tightened around his trident. The ocean trembled in response. And then, Poseidon struck. A single thrust of his weapon, and the sea itself screamed. A wave, not of water but of force, erupted outward. The pressure alone shattered the seabed, sending shards of stone and coral slicing through flesh, through armor. Forces reeled. His ancient body convulsed as the force of Poseidon's wrath tore through him, through his legions, through the ocean itself. The sea was not his anymore. It belonged to Poseidon. It always had. The darkness did not move. It watched. Cold. Suffocating. Alive. The air within the Titan stronghold was thick with the stench of sweat and old blood, the lingering heat of torches licking at the stone walls. Guards stood like statues, their grips tight on their weapons, their breath steady, but something was wrong. The air felt different. A whisper of something unseen, a presence they could not name but could feel, curling against their skin like cold fingers. One guard shifted, glancing over his shoulder. There was nothing. The flickering light cast long, jagged shadows across the corridors, twisting the shapes of the stone into gaping maws and reaching claws. Something was here. Something silent. Something waiting. He swallowed hard. Then, the torches died. A gust of wind? No. Not wind. A force, an absence, something so utterly void of life that even fire could not stand against it. The shadows swelled, stretching, bleeding into every corner until the stronghold became a tomb of absolute black. And then the screaming began. Not the wild, panicked cries of men facing an enemy they could see, but something worse. The terror of those who did not know where death was coming from, only that it was near. The sound of metal hitting stone, bodies collapsing, choked gasps that barely left the throat before being silenced. One by one, they vanished. The last guard stood alone. His pulse pounded, his breaths too fast, his sword shaking in his grip. His eyes darted through the pitch, seeking any shape, any sign of movement, but there was nothing. No light. No sound. No mercy. And then, a whisper. It was not a voice. It was lower than that. A presence, a thing slithering into his thoughts, wrapping around his bones, filling his lungs like cold smoke. It knew him. It had always known him. the sword slipped from his fingers. The last thing he felt was a hand, freezing, intangible, and terribly, terribly real, closing around his throat. Hades released the corpse before it hit the ground. The helm of darkness did not make him invisible. It made him nothing. A whisper of thought, a shadow where there should be none, a ghost breathing against the nape of a neck. He did not move through the stronghold. He was the stronghold. The walls did not see him pass, the stone did not know he had walked upon it. He stepped over the fallen, their bodies twisted in frozen terror, eyes wide though they had never seen their killer. They never would. This was his war. Not the open field clashes of clashing steel, nor the earth-shattering blows of titans and gods locked in combat. No. Hades fought in silence. In the places where men felt safest. In the shadows they dismissed as their own. In the moments between heartbeats. And now, the stronghold was his. Somewhere within these walls, the Titans hoarded their plans, strategies, formations, secret paths they believed the gods would never find. They were wrong. A door loomed before him. Heavy iron, locked, warded, protected by every means the Titans could muster. But locks meant nothing to the unseen. The air shifted, the weight of existence thinning. He did not pass through the door. He simply ceased to exist on one side and returned on the other. Inside, maps and scrolls lay scattered across a great wooden table, torches flickering in their iron sconces. The Titan commanders had been here. Had been. Hades did not hesitate. The helm hummed around him, a second skin of living darkness, shifting, breathing, whispering to him of every unseen thing. He took what he needed, his fingers ghosting over parchment, snatching secrets from the mouths of those who would never know he had been here. Then, a presence. His grip tightened around the hilt of his sword. The shadows stirred. Not his own. A Titan. Not a soldier. A hunter. Someone who knew the nature of silence, who understood the way shadows did not always belong to the things that cast them. Hades did not move. The Titan stepped forward, gaze sweeping the room, his breathing slow, controlled. He knew something was here. He just didn't know where. A pause. A single breath stretched into eternity. Then, the Titan struck. A blade lashed out, cleaving through empty air. But Hades was already gone, his form melting into the void, a spectre slipping through the cracks of the world. The Titan cursed, his eyes darting through the chamber, searching, waiting. But how can you fight what you cannot find? Hades reappeared behind him. A dagger to the throat. A final, sharp breath. The Titan slumped, his lifeblood painting the stone. And then, the shadows swallowed him whole. Hades stepped away, his helm whispering, pleased. The stronghold had fallen. Not in fire. Not in battle. But in silence. And there was nothing more terrifying than that. The air between them crackled, not with lightning, not with fire, but with something colder, sharper. A silence that was no longer silence. A presence. A wound waiting to be torn open. Hyperion did not move. The golden light of his skin burned dim, his usual radiance swallowed by the weight pressing down upon him. Across the war table, Iapetus stood rigid, his fingers curled against the wood as if he meant to tear it apart. Neither spoke. Not yet. But the silence was breaking. A flicker of movement. Hyperion's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. He saw it. The way Iapetus shifted his weight, the way his breath had changed, the way his pulse thundered in his throat. This was not hesitation. This was betrayal. Hyperion exhaled slowly. So this was how it would be. He had always known the cracks were there, that beneath the ironclad loyalty of their brotherhood, something rotten festered. He had seen it in the way Iapetus held his tongue when Cronus spoke, in the way his eyes lingered too long on Zeus' growing army. But now, it was no longer a shadow lurking at the edges of war. Now, it stood before him. Alive. Unavoidable. Unforgivable. A heartbeat. Then, a blade. Iapetus moved first. Fast. Brutal. No flourish, no hesitation. Just steel, cutting through the stale air, aiming for the throat. Hyperion was faster. His hand lashed out, catching the wrist mid-strike, his grip tightening until bones groaned in protest. Their gazes locked. A moment of knowing. A moment of realization. This was not an argument. This was an execution. With a sudden twist, Hyperion wrenched the blade away, sent it clattering to the stone. Iapetus did not recoil. He did not flinch. The betrayal had already been committed. What use was hesitation now? Hyperion felt it then, the full weight of what was happening. This was no petty quarrel. This was war, fracturing from within. The Titans were already losing against the gods, their thrones crumbling beneath them, and now, this. Brother against brother. His fingers tightened around Iapetus' throat. Why? His voice was low, raw. He wanted to understand. He wanted to unhear what he already knew. Iapetus' lips curled, not in anger, not in regret, in something colder. The Titans are already dead, Hyperion. A whisper. A promise. The words hit harder than any blade. Hyperion's grip faltered. Just for a second. Just long enough. Iapetus struck. A fist to the ribs, a sharp knee to the gut. Hyperion staggered back, the force knocking the breath from his lungs. Iapetus didn't stop. He drove forward, relentless, a wolf tearing into an injured prey, striking, shoving, clawing. Hyperion burned. Light erupted from his skin, gold and fire, the fury of the sun itself. Iapetus snarled, his own power flaring, a twisting, dark force, something ancient and unyielding. Their clash shook the walls. This was not strategy. This was not war. This was survival. A blow landed, and Hyperion felt it, the sharp crack of something giving way inside his chest. He staggered, but Iapetus didn't let up. He lunged again, teeth bared, eyes wild with something that wasn't anger, wasn't hatred. It was certainty. He had already chosen. Hyperion caught the next strike, barely. Blood dripped from his mouth, his breath ragged, but his grip was like iron. His free hand slammed into Iapetus' ribs, the force sending his brother crashing through the war table. Wood splintered, maps were shredded under their weight, and the room trembled beneath the force of Titans turning against Titans. They lay there for a moment. Panting. Bleeding. Watching. Hyperion saw it then, what he had refused to see before. Iapetus did not just want to win. He wanted the Titans to fall. He wanted to be free of Cronus. Free of the old ways. Free of the war that would never end as long as Titans fought Titans. And that meant one thing. Hyperion had to die. The realization tasted bitter on his tongue. He forced himself to stand. Iapetus mirrored him, slow, deliberate. Their gazes met again. There was nothing left to say. They were not brothers anymore. They were just two Titans standing on the edge of something neither could escape. The war outside raged on. The gods were coming. Their father was failing. The Titans were crumbling. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Only the betrayal. Only the fight. Only the end. The earth wept. Not with water, not with blood, but with something older, something that had never been given a name. A sorrow so vast it did not cry out, it swallowed everything instead. The sky above had no answer. The stars had watched. The wind had carried the screams. But none of them stopped it. None of them saved her children. Gaia felt them die. One by one. She felt the weight of their bodies as they fell, crashing upon her skin, their power torn away, their voices strangled into silence. She had carried them in her womb, had shaped them from dust and breath, had given them everything. And now they were gone. Because of the gods. Because of him. Zeus. His name burned through her like poison, like a wound that could never heal. The war was over, or so the gods believed. They stood upon the smoking ruins of her children's bones, crowned in false glory, blind to the rage that had begun to stir beneath their feet. They had no idea. Gaia did not scream. She did not wail. She did not shatter the sky with her grief. No, grief was for those who accepted loss. And Gaia did not accept. She had never accepted. She would make them pay. A tremor rippled through the earth. A heartbeat. A warning. The gods, so high in their thrones, so secure in their power, did not feel it. They did not hear the whispers curling through the roots, the murmurs slithering through the stone, the ancient promise rising from the dark. But Gaia did. She called to it. Beneath the mountains, beneath the forgotten ruins of a world before titans and gods, something shifted. A slow, steady pulse, like breath returning to long-dead lungs. The earth cracked, a fault line that had not moved since the first dawn began to bleed. He was waking. Gaia's hands pressed against the soil, her fingers sinking into the dirt as if into flesh, and her voice, low and raw, curled into the cracks like smoke. Typhon. The name did not echo. It sank. It burrowed. It touched something that should have never been disturbed. The pulse quickened. The stone groaned. She whispered again, her voice no longer grief-stricken but hungry. They murdered your kin. They took their heads as trophies, ripped their bodies apart, and called it victory. The mountains trembled. Something growled. They left you to rot beneath their feet. They buried you, thinking you would never rise again. The winds above howled as the ground split. A claw, blackened with age, rose through the dirt. Enormous. Vicious. The fingers twitched once, then clenched into a fist. Gaia's breath shuddered. He was here. A second hand tore free, and then a shoulder, then another, until the mountain itself seemed to heave, rolling like a living thing trying to shake off its chains. Typhon opened his eyes. There was no whiteness in them, no flicker of thought, no gleam of reason. Only darkness, raw and endless, stretching further than any mortal or god could comprehend. Gaia reached for him. They took everything from you. A breath like a storm, like a hurricane swallowing the sky. The ground beneath her sank, her body drawn toward him as if the very air around them was breaking apart. They thought you were forgotten. His mouth opened. The sound that came forth was not a roar. It was a promise. Gaia smiled. She had lost her titans. But she would not lose again. The gods would learn. The war was not over. It had barely begun. The sky split open. Not with thunder, not with fire, but with the sound of 100 fists crashing into the earth, tearing it apart, shattering everything. The battlefield, already a graveyard of titans and gods alike, trembled beneath the weight of something ancient, something unstoppable. The air went still. A silence, thick and suffocating, wrapped around the warriors locked in combat, as if the world itself had frozen in terror. Then, the roar. It was not one voice. It was not 10. It was 100, all screaming in unison, a sound so massive it did not just fill the battlefield, it consumed it. A war cry that shook the bones of Olympus itself. The hecaton chairs had arrived. From the dust, from the shadows of forgotten prison walls, they came. Briareus. Cottus. Gyges. Their names were carved into the nightmares of the titans, etched into the whispers of the gods. They had been chained beneath the earth, buried in darkness for too long. Now, they were free. The first blow landed like a mountain falling from the sky. A titan barely had time to turn before 100 fists tore through him, rending flesh from bone, grinding immortal sinew into dust. The second strike shattered the ground itself, sending shockwaves through the battlefield, toppling soldiers like broken twigs. There was no stopping them. A Titan general, one of Cronus' mightiest, raised his blade, his voice a frantic command, too late. A massive arm, thick as an ancient tree, slammed into him with such force that his golden armor crumpled like brittle parchment. His body, once proud and invincible, ceased to exist. Blood. Ash. Screams. The Titans fought back, because they had no other choice. They hurled mountains, they wielded blades forged in the heart of the cosmos, they unleashed storms that could tear mortals apart with a glance. But it wasn't enough. How do you fight something with 100 arms? How do you cut down something that never stops moving, never stops striking? Everywhere at once. One Titan launched forward, sword gleaming, rage in his eyes. A hand caught him by the throat. Another gripped his arm. Another seized his leg. More hands. Too many hands. They ripped him apart like a child breaking a doll. Briareus laughed, a sound like boulders crashing into the sea. His brothers followed, their hands dripping with divine ichor, their eyes burning with the fire of vengeance. They had been imprisoned. They had been forgotten. And now, they would remind the world who they were. The gods watched, their eyes wide. Some in horror, some in awe. Even Zeus, king of Olympus, stood still for a moment, lightning flickering at his fingertips. He had unleashed them, but even he had not truly known what they were capable of. The Titans were falling. One by one, their armies breaking. The battlefield belonged to the hundred-handed ones now. And nothing would stop them. The sky was burning. Lightning shattered the heavens, the ground split apart, and the cries of dying Titans echoed through the void. The battle had turned against them. His battle! Cronus stood alone on a crumbling ridge, his golden armor smeared with ichor, his breath sharp and uneven. His hands trembled, not with fear but with something darker. Rage. Desperation. The taste of looming defeat. His armies were breaking, crushed beneath the relentless onslaught of the gods and their monstrous allies. The Hecatoncheirs tore through his legions like wolves in a flock of dying sheep. Poseidon's tidal waves swallowed entire battalions whole. Hades lurked unseen, striking from the shadows, dragging Titan warriors into the abyss. And Zeus, his traitorous son, stood above all, throwing thunder like a god drunk on power. Cronus clenched his fists. This was not how it was supposed to end. He had ruled the cosmos. He had torn his own father from the throne. He had swallowed his children to prevent exactly this. And yet, here he was, watching everything fall apart. A Titan general staggered toward him, armor cracked, blood dripping from his mouth. "Lord Cronus, we must retreat," the words had barely left his lips before a bolt of lightning split his chest open. He crumpled, smoke rising from his corpse, the stink of burned flesh curling into the wind. Cronus didn't flinch. He barely even blinked. Retreat? There was nowhere left to run. A roar of thunder. A flash of white-hot light. In the distance, another Titan fell. The gods were winning. No. No, no, no. Not yet. His lips curled into a snarl. There was one path left, one door he had refused to open. Not out of mercy, he had none left to give, but because some forces were not meant to be summoned. Even by him. But the time for restraint was gone. Cronus turned, his fingers twitching as he reached toward the broken earth beneath him. He could feel it there, something ancient. Something buried. Something older than the gods. The ground pulsed beneath his feet. His brothers had spoken of it only in whispers. A power so raw, so untamed, that even the Titans had feared it. A power born before the sky had names, before the first star had bled its light into the void. Cronus inhaled sharply. And then he called to it. Not with words, words were nothing here. He tore open his own power, reaching beyond the world as it was, grasping into the nothingness where the true darkness lay. His voice was a silent scream, not of sound, but of raw command, a demand so absolute that the universe itself had no choice but to listen. And something listened back. The air around him turned to ice. The sky flickered. The stars themselves seemed to shudder. The battlefield fell silent, not in victory, not in surrender, but in dread. The gods felt it. The Titans felt it. Even the Hecatoncheirs, those mindless beasts of war, paused, their 100 fists hovering in the air, as if some buried instinct warned them to stop. The wind died. The clouds twisted in unnatural shapes, curling in on themselves like a wound trying to heal. The earth beneath Cronus' feet cracked, splitting open like rotten flesh. And then, the whisper. It did not come from his lips. It did not come from the wind. It came from everywhere at once. Soft. Hungry. Ancient beyond reckoning. You dare call me? Cronus' breath hitched. Even he was not prepared for the voice. It was not one voice, not 1,000, but all voices at once. A chorus of the forgotten, the ones who had existed before time, before form, before light. A shadow, darker than the void between stars, began to rise from the earth, stretching impossibly tall. It had no face. No true form. Just emptiness, shifting and writhing, as if reality itself was recoiling from its presence. The gods stepped back. Even Zeus. Even Hades. Because this was not Titan. This was not God. This was something else. Something that was never meant to be awakened. And Cronus had called it forth. The wind howled like a wounded beast. Arthre's peak stood like the shattered spine of the world, its jagged rocks slick with blood, its slopes trembling beneath the weight of war. This was the battlefield. This was the end. The sky was not a sky anymore, it was a battleground of gods, titans, and forces too ancient to be named. Bolts of lightning ripped the heavens apart, great gouts of fire swallowed the darkness, and the air itself bled with power. Zeus stood at the summit, his breath heaving, his knuckles white around the haft of his thunderbolt. His brothers flanked him, a Poseidon, wreathed in crashing waves, his trident gleaming with the promise of destruction. Hades, a silent shadow at the edge of the world, his helm swallowing the light. This was their war to end. And below them, Cronus waited. The Titan king was a ruin of gold and fury, his body armored in the fractured remains of a kingdom that had once stretched across eternity. His blade, long as a warship, glowed with something older than the Olympians. His eyes burned. With hatred. With defiance. With the knowledge that this was his last stand. The battlefield roared. The first to strike was Poseidon. The ocean answered his call. A wall of water, black as the night, surged up the mountainside, crashing into the Titan ranks with a force that split the stone. Bodies were torn apart, hurled into the abyss, their screams swallowed by the wrath of the sea. But the Titans did not fall. Hyperion, wreathed in the burning corona of the sun, stepped forward. His hands caught the wave, caught it and turned it to fire. The sea burned. The very air ignited, screaming with steam and fury, as Hyperion hurled a flaming fist toward Poseidon. The god twisted away, barely escaping the inferno that melted the stone where he had stood. Zeus did not wait. He became lightning, streaking through the chaos, his father's face locked in his sights. Cronus saw him coming. He raised his blade and met the storm head-on. The impact shattered the sky. Thunder roared as their weapons clashed, as god and titan were thrown apart only to collide again, each strike shaking the foundations of the world. Zeus' thunderbolt screamed in his grip, bolts of white-hot destruction lashing out like chained serpents. Cronus' blade carved through them as if they were mist. He did not waver. He did not retreat. He would not be overthrown. Below them, chaos erupted. The Hecatoncheirs, those 100-handed nightmares, tore into the Titan ranks. Their fists moved like storms, their strength the destruction of cities, their roars the sound of mountains breaking apart. Titans screamed as they were ripped limb from limb, their bodies crushed beneath an onslaught so merciless it turned the battlefield into a graveyard. Atlas fought like a thing possessed. His great shoulders bore the weight of the Titan resistance, his every strike sending Olympians flying. Ars fell beneath his fists, bones shattered, blood spraying in the wind. But Athena was there, a spear through Atlas' ribs, a battle cry that split the sky. On the other side of the battlefield, Helios and Selene, twin deities of the sun and moon, moved as one, their weapons dancing in arcs of gold and silver. Against them stood Apollo and Artemis, their arrows seeking weak points in ancient armor, their aim never missing. The earth trembled as Gaia's lament echoed across the mountains. Her children were dying. And still, Zeus and Cronus fought. Every strike of the Titan King's blade was a killing blow, but Zeus did not fall. Every crash of the god's thunderbolt was a god's wrath made real, but Cronus did not falter. Blood dripped from Zeus' brow. A gash along Cronus' arm leaked golden ichor. They did not stop. They could not stop. Then, Cronus lunged. His blade moved too fast, too deadly. Zeus barely had time to shift, but the edge caught him, his shoulder tore open, the pain a white-hot explosion through his body. He staggered, knees buckling, the world spinning. Cronus raised his weapon for the final blow. And then Hades struck. He came from the shadows, his form barely a breath of darkness, his blade silent. It found its mark, slipping between the Titan's ribs, drinking his power, draining him. Cronus gasped. His fingers went numb. His blade, so steady, so unyielding, faltered. Zeus didn't hesitate. With the last of his strength, he raised his thunderbolt and brought the storm. The world exploded. The earth was broken. The sky hung in ragged shreds, torn apart by war, by wrath, by the vengeance of gods who had carved their victory from the bodies of their own kin. The air was thick with smoke and blood, the battlefield nothing but ruin. And in the center of it all, Cronus fell. His knee struck the stone with a hollow thud, his breath ragged, his golden ichor pooling beneath him. The Titan King, once the ruler of the cosmos, now a ruin of himself. His blade was gone, his strength ripped away by the very suns he had sought to devour. Zeus stood over him, lightning crackling in his veins, in his bones, in his clenched fists. This was the moment. The war had been fought, the earth had suffered, and now, the old world would end. Cronus lifted his head, his once mighty gaze dull, the weight of eternity pressing down on his shoulders. He had ruled time itself, bent the cosmos to his will, yet here he was, broken, beaten, waiting for the sentence he already knew was coming. The other titans lay in ruin around him. Hyperion, his light dimmed, his body crushed beneath the weight of the hecaton chairs. Atlas, kneeling, his shoulders already trembling beneath the punishment he had yet to receive. Creos, Coeus, Iapetus, all brought low. Gods who had once shaped the heavens, now prisoners of war. The Olympians did not celebrate. There was no triumph in this, no victory that did not taste of ash. The battle was over, but the scars it left would never fade. Zeus raised his hand. A low, terrible rumble shook the battlefield. Tartarus stirred. The earth cracked open, a wound so vast it seemed to have no end, a darkness so thick it swallowed the light. The abyss waited. It had always waited, for this, for them. Cronus did not beg. He did not scream. He simply closed his eyes as the chains came, forged from the bones of the defeated, burning with the fire of the god's will. They wrapped around his wrists, his ankles, his throat, unyielding, unbreaking, dragging him toward the chasm that would be his eternity. The other titans struggled, some roaring, some silent in their resignation, but it did not matter. The chains knew their names, knew their sins, knew where they belonged. The darkness took them. Atlas fought. Of course, he fought. His hands clawed at the stone, his strength pushing against the will of the gods, but it was useless. He was already condemned. His punishment was not oblivion, it was suffering. Zeus turned to him, his voice cold as the storms he wielded. "You will hold the sky." Atlas bared his teeth, fury bleeding from every wound, but the command was law, and the sky fell onto his shoulders. The weight of the heavens crashed down, an agony beyond pain, beyond endurance, but he did not break. He could not. That was his curse. The last titan vanished into Tartarus, swallowed by the abyss, the screams of the fallen lost in the nothingness. The war was over. And yet, the silence was not peace. The air was heavy. Unbearably heavy. Atlas knelt on the broken earth, his chest heaving, his arms shaking, his breath ragged from the weight that had not yet fallen, but would. Oh, it would. Zeus stood before him, cold as the thunder that still crackled at his fingertips. His victory was absolute. The Titans were in chains, their cries swallowed by Tartarus. But Atlas would not be cast into the abyss. His punishment would be worse. The sky loomed above, vast, endless, waiting. It had always been there, untouched, drifting above the world in serene dominion. Now it would fall. Now it would crush. Now it would break a god. Zeus' voice was a blade. You will hold it. Atlas lifted his head, his golden eyes burning with defiance, but there was nothing left to fight. The war was over. The world had been claimed. The Olympians ruled now, and he was nothing. The command settled into the bones of the cosmos, and then, the sky fell. Atlas had no time to brace, no moment to prepare, just a breath, just a heartbeat, and then it was upon him. The weight of the heavens, of every cloud, every star, every unspoken whisper of the cosmos slammed down. His spine arched, his knees buckled, his arms, gods, his arms, struggled to find the strength to withstand it. But there was no choice. He could not falter. He could not fail. Failure meant oblivion. Pain ripped through every sinew, every tendon screaming in protest, his bones straining, fracturing, his muscles burning with the fire of exertion beyond mortal comprehension. But he did not collapse. He did not break. The sky would not let him. Zeus watched, impassive, as Atlas fought against eternity. The Titan's breaths came in ragged bursts, sweat carving rivers down his skin, his legs trembling beneath the unbearable burden. Forever, Zeus said. A single word, a sentence written in stone. There would be no end. Atlas clenched his teeth, his body already a battlefield of agony, but the true horror had yet to come. It was not the pain. It was not the crushing force of the heavens pressing against him. It was the knowledge, the certainty, that he would never be free. Days would pass. Years. Centuries. Eons. The world would change, empires would rise and crumble, gods would love and war, and still, he would hold. Time lost meaning. His mind splintered against eternity, each breath a struggle, each moment an unbearable stretch of suffering. But he did not cry out. He did not plead. He did not beg. Because there was no one listening. There never would be. The air was thick with the scent of scorched earth and blood. The echoes of war still clung to the wind, but Olympus stood untouched and waiting. A throne needed its king. The Titanomachy was over. The sky no longer trembled with the roars of giants. The ground no longer cracked beneath the weight of gods in combat. The screams of the fallen had faded into silence, their voices swallowed by Tartarus, where they would remain for eternity. But Olympus did not weep for them. The victors had claimed their spoils. The Titans were gone, cast into the abyss, chained in the depths where the sun could not reach. The old world had been buried beneath its own ruins. And now, only the new remained. Zeus stood at the peak of Olympus, his skin still humming with the aftershock of thunder, his breath slow, measured. His knuckles curled around his lightning bolt, but there was no need to strike anymore. There was no one left to challenge him. His brothers stood at his side, Poseidon, the sea still swirling in the depths of his eyes, and Hades, silent, unreadable, his fingers still stained with the dust of the fallen. They had fought together. Now they would rule together. But Zeus alone would sit on the throne. The halls of Olympus had never seen such gods before. The Titans had built them, believing themselves eternal, unshakable. They had sat upon these golden seats, certain their rule would never wane. Fools! Zeus walked forward, each step an unspoken declaration. His eye swept over the shattered remains of what had once belonged to the old gods, their banners torn, their symbols discarded. Their era was gone. The other Olympians watched in silence. Hera, eyes sharp as a dagger's edge. Demeter, her breath caught somewhere between relief and grief. Hestia, steady as ever, though something unreadable flickered beneath her gaze. And then there was Athena, standing tall, unshaken. Born in war, sculpted by battle, she did not tremble before the weight of their victory. They had won. But victory did not come without its price. The sky was theirs now. The earth bowed to them. The seas whispered their names. But beneath it all, something lingered. A whisper of what had been. A warning of what could come. Zeus knew it. Felt it. Power was a living thing. It did not settle, it did not sleep. It burned. It consumed. And it had chosen him. He turned, and the Olympians knelt. One by one. The new world had begun. The sky stretched vast and silent, broken only by the slow, rolling echoes of the war that had ended. The land was still bruised from the weight of fallen gods, the mountains bearing wounds that would never heal. Rivers ran dark with the remnants of battle, and the wind carried whispers of names that would never be spoken again. The Titans were gone. Their rule was dust. But power never stayed in the void for long. Three figures stood atop the shattered peak of R3s, staring into the distance, where the world lay beneath them, waiting. Their bodies still bore the marks of war, scars from blades that could wound even the divine, bruises from fists that had shaken the earth. They had fought side by side, but now they stood apart, brothers bound by blood, divided by fate. Zeus exhaled, slow and steady, his grip tightening around the master bolt in his hand. It still crackled, restless. The air smelled of rain, but no storm fell, not yet. The sky watched, waiting. Poseidon's breath was salt. The ocean churned in his veins, and he could feel the tide clawing at the edges of the land, desperate to rise, to swallow, to claim. His trident, still slick with the blood of war, pulsed in his grip. Hades stood unmoving, his shadow stretching long beneath the dying sun. His hands, dark with the dust of the fallen, were still and patient. The weight of the underworld called to him, a whisper in his ear, a pull at his spine. He had known, even before this moment, what was coming. 3 brothers. 3 gods. But only one world. The silence was thick. Heavy. It pressed against their ribs, filled their lungs like drowning. The Titans had ruled without question. Their father had devoured them in his hunger to keep his throne, but now Cronus lay in ruin, his screams swallowed by the depths of Tartarus. Their fates were their own now. But no throne was built for 3. Zeus was the first to speak. His voice did not waver. It did not question. It simply was. The world must be divided. No one argued. The war had already answered that question. Zeus lifted his hand, fingers curling into a fist, and the clouds twisted above them. The sky is mine. His words struck like lightning, undeniable, inescapable. The air itself seemed to bow, shuddering under his command. He had been born in darkness, hidden from the hunger of his father, but now he stood in the open, unchallenged, unafraid. Poseidon's eyes burned, but he nodded. There was no war left to fight, not against his brother. The sea raged in his chest, a storm begging to be unleashed, but it would not take Olympus. Not today. He slammed his trident into the ground, and the earth shivered. The ocean belongs to me. The waves far below answered in kind, rising, roaring, an endless kingdom with no walls, no boundaries. Then, the final claim. Hades did not move. Did not blink. He had always known. The underworld had already wrapped its fingers around his soul. It had swallowed the bodies of the Titans, pulled their restless spirits into the abyss. It had chosen him long before he could choose it. He spoke, quiet but absolute. The dead are mine. The word settled. The world shifted. The sky, the sea, and the underworld each bent beneath the weight of their new rulers. The war had ended, but the gods had only just begun. Zeus turned to face his brothers, his jaw set. his eyes flashing with something final. "Swear it." Poseidon's nostrils flared. The sea did not swear to the sky. But the war had already been lost, and the ocean could never reach the peak of Olympus. He nodded, a sharp, reluctant tilt of his head. Hades did not blink. He did not move. He did not bow. But when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of the dead beneath the earth. "So be it." It was done. The sky rumbled, the tides crashed, the underworld sighed. The world had been torn apart and stitched back together again in the span of a breath. 3 kings. 3 thrones. And between them, only silence. The thread was red. Not with dye, not with paint, but with something older, something woven from the marrow of time itself. It pulsed, faintly, like a heartbeat long forgotten. It stretched from nothing and into eternity, held between fingers that had never known hesitation. The first hand was worn, lined with the weight of centuries. It moved with purpose, unyielding, the fingers pulling at the fiber, stretching it taut. Clotho, the spinner. The beginning. She breathed out, and a new strand was drawn from the void, trembling as it took form. Beside her, Lachesis measured. Her lips did not move, but her mind spoke in the language of fate. She held the golden rod against the thread, her eyes unblinking as she traced the length it would be allowed. A breath too long, a whisper too short, either could unravel empires, ignite wars, shatter gods. There was no room for mistakes. Then came the end. The shears gleamed in the dim light, twin fangs waiting for the final decree. Atropos did not pause. She did not wait for pleas, for bargains, for second thoughts. Her fingers tightened, the cold metal kissed the thread, and with a single, effortless snip, it was done. A life. A king. A beggar. A god. It did not matter. The Moirai did not weep. The room held no torches, yet the shadows twisted as if they had life of their own. Perhaps they did. They coiled around the sisters, whispering secrets only they could hear, secrets they had always known. Outside, the world moved blindly, unaware that its pulse was dictated not by the will of men, nor gods, but by hands far older than both. Even Zeus, king of the heavens, did not command them. He had tried once. He had stood where no god should stand, his voice shaking Olympus itself as he demanded dominion over fate. But the Moirai had only looked at him, their eyes empty, unafraid. And in that silence, he had understood. Not even the god of thunder could strike down what had been woven. The golden scales rested beside them, untouched. No hand had ever placed judgment upon them, and none ever would. They did not tip for love, nor rage, nor vengeance. They moved only for balance. And balance would always be kept. Somewhere far below, a child took its first breath. Somewhere above, a warrior drew his last. The Moirai did not watch. They did not need to. The threads had already been spun. The fire shuddered in his hands. Tiny, flickering, fragile, yet more powerful than the gods themselves. It pulsed like a newborn heartbeat, a trembling ember cradled in stolen defiance. Prometheus had done the unthinkable. The weight of Olympus bore down on his shoulders, but his grip did not falter. Not now. Not after everything. He could still hear the silence of the heavens, the cold finality in Zeus' voice as he cast his decree, mankind shall remain in darkness. Forever. But Prometheus had stood before that throne, unbowed, unmoving. He had seen the cruelty beneath the golden laurels, the arrogance burning behind those thunderous eyes. Zeus feared them. Not as they were, weak, shivering, blind in the cold, but for what they could become. With fire. His fingers curled tighter around the stolen flame. The gods had wielded it for eons, shaping the world with its rage, with its hunger. Now it belonged to mortals. Now, it would burn for them. The wind howled through the night, gnawing at his flesh as he descended from Olympus. Far below, the world lay still, shrouded in endless cold. He could see them, the humans, huddled like wounded animals in the dark. Bones jutted from skin stretched too thin, their breath-fragile clouds lost to the wind. Zeus had cursed them, deemed them lesser, bound them in chains of ignorance. But Prometheus had watched them, studied them, loved them. He had seen their hands, raw and broken, clawing at the earth, refusing to die. They deserved more. His foot met the frozen ground. The fire in his hand flared, sensing its purpose. He moved forward, every step carving rebellion into the fabric of the cosmos. The air crackled as he stretched out his hand, the flame trembling, eager, waiting. Then, he gave it to them. A gasp. A spark. Then, a roar. The fire leapt to life, devouring the kindling like a starving beast. Shadows recoiled from its light, and for the first time, the darkness was forced to retreat. A child reached out, hesitant, wide-eyed. A woman's trembling fingers traced the warmth, as if touching something holy. Then, laughter. Wild, unbelieving, triumphant. The fire reflected in their eyes, and Prometheus saw it, the awakening. They understood. Heat surged through their veins. The cold no longer held them hostage. They would survive. And more than that, they would rise. They would build, forge, create. They would become something even the gods could not control. Above, the heavens rumbled. Prometheus did not look back. Let Zeus rage. Let the storm come. The fire had already been lit. The chains groaned as they tightened, biting into flesh, grinding against bone. Prometheus did not scream. Not when they bound his arms to the jagged rock. Not when they stretched his body taut, leaving him at the mercy of the sky. Not even when the laughter of the gods faded into the wind, leaving only the vast, merciless silence of the mountain. The silence did not last. A shadow split the sky. Wings. Massive, dark, circling. A predator's patience, savoring the inevitability of its feast. It was coming. The wind howled through the crags of Caucasus, a sharp, merciless lament. Below, the world he had saved flickered with fire, his fire. The gift that had sealed his fate. He had seen their faces when he gave it to them, their hands reaching, their eyes igniting with something gods could never understand. Hope. Defiance. Freedom. Zeus had understood. And he had answered. A screech split the air. It had arrived. The eagle was not of this earth. No simple beast of feather and talon, it was a thing of hunger, of punishment made flesh. The executioner of Olympus. A shadow loomed over him. He turned his head, only slightly, for the chains allowed no mercy, and met the glint of golden eyes. They knew each other now. He had seen those eyes every day, every night. His companion. His tormentor. His devourer. Clawed feet scraped against stone. It landed. The air rippled with the heat of its breath, with the sharpness of its intent. It cocked its head, studying him, waiting, always waiting. Then, agony. Beak met flesh. Ripped. Tore. A sound not meant for mortal ears. Blood splattered against the rock, black in the fading light. His liver, wrenched from his body. The pain was fire, searing, unrelenting, white-hot and endless. It spread through every nerve, every fiber of his being. His body convulsed, but the chains held firm. There was no escape. The eagle feasted. Flesh shredded. Bones cracked. The mountain bore witness, silent and unmoved. And still, Prometheus did not scream. The gods had waited for his breaking. They would wait forever. Night swallowed the sky. The eagle, sated, lifted its wings and vanished into the darkness. But the punishment was not over. The true cruelty lay in the dawn. For with the first light, the wound would close. The flesh would mend. The agony would retreat into the depths of his bones, only to be reborn with the setting sun. Tomorrow, the eagle would return. Tomorrow, it would begin again. Forever. The silence before the storm is the cruelest trick of all. A hush draped over the world, thick and unnatural. No birds, no wind, no breath of the gods disturbing the still air. The box sat before her, glinting dully in the dim light. Small. Unassuming. Lying. Pandora's hands trembled. Not from fear. Not yet. Curiosity had its grip on her, whispering in her ear, urging her forward. The gods had given her beauty, grace, wit, but above all, they had given her that insatiable hunger to know. Her fingers traced the lid. The warning had been simple: do not open it. But simple things are the easiest to ignore. A single breath, sharp and shallow, and she lifted the lid. The world broke. A sound erupted, high and shrieking, like the wail of something long dead and suddenly reborn. It poured from the box like thick smoke, slithering, crawling, rising. Shadows coiled around her, stretching and clawing at the light. And then they came. Agony burst forth first, its form ever-shifting, a beast of endless hunger, its very presence a wound. It tore through the air, latching onto the world, sinking its fangs into the hearts of men. Pain was eternal now. No body would be untouched, no soul unscathed. Betrayal slithered after, faceless yet grinning, whispering sweet lies that curdled into poison. Trust withered in an instant. Lovers, friends, brothers, all would learn to doubt. Famine crawled next, hollow-eyed, its breath stealing the richness from the land. Mouths would hunger. Hands would grasp at nothing. War crashed into the light, all fury and steel, its roar splitting the sky. The scent of blood filled the air before the first blade was even drawn. Death followed them all, walking slow, patient, smiling. And there were others, too many to count, sickness and sorrow, madness and despair, all clawing and writhing, spreading into the world. They did not simply escape, they invaded. Pandora fell to her knees, choking on the weight of what she had done. It would never be undone. The gods had known this. They had placed the box in her hands not as a gift, but as a curse. She was the instrument, the catalyst, the fool. And then, a whisper. Not a scream. Not a curse. Not a wail of suffering. Small. Soft. Something remained. With shaking hands, Pandora slammed the lid shut. But it was too late. The horrors had gone. The world would never be whole again. Yet in the darkness of the box, one last thing stirred. Hope. And it, too, was trapped. The earth groaned. Not a tremor, not a sigh, but a cry of something ancient and enraged. The mountains shuddered in response, their roots quaking in the unseen agony that coursed beneath them. The skies held their breath. Something was stirring. Gaia lay silent beneath the weight of her grief, a mother mourning her lost children. Her titans, broken and cast away, their chains heavy, their power smothered by the rule of the usurper. Zeus. His name burned through the soil, a curse spat from the lips of the wounded earth itself. But grief is never just grief. It festers. It hardens into something sharp, something that does not weep, does not break. Something that seeks vengeance. And so she created. Not gently, not with the nurturing touch of the mother who bore the first gods into existence. No, this birth was violence. It was raw, an act of war, not love. A response to cruelty with cruelty. The first scream shattered the sky. The ground split apart, molten rivers bursting from the wounds in the earth, searing the air, blackening the land. The mountains trembled, their peaks crumbling beneath the force of something being forced into the world, something that did not belong. Typhon crawled from the abyss. His body was chaos given form, a nightmare made flesh. Limbs twisted and writhing, never the same shape twice. Wings, massive and torn, beat against the heavens, blocking out the sun. His eyes burned, not with fire, not with rage, but with something worse. Purpose. Gaia watched. She did not speak. She did not weep. She had birthed destruction. She had birthed the end. And Typhon, her last son, knew his task. The world stopped. A silence, vast and unnatural, smothered the land. The mountains had stilled, the seas had recoiled, the very sky seemed to hold its breath. It knew. The earth was not meant to bear witness to this. It would not survive it. Then, the first step. A tremor rippled through the ground, then another. Closer. Heavier. The air grew thick, suffocating. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisted by something too large, too monstrous. Typhon had arrived. A grotesque titan of fury and ruin, born of vengeance, forged in wrath. His form defied sense, limbs shifting, heads writhing, wings unfurling wide enough to block out the sun. His eyes burned, black pits of bottomless rage. And then, he roared. It was not a sound. It was destruction. The force of it tore trees from the earth, cracked mountains, sent rivers surging backward in terror. It split the clouds, sent thunder screaming through the heavens. It was a challenge. And the sky answered. A single bolt of lightning tore through the darkness, splitting the heavens with blinding, merciless fury. The air ignited, a white-hot wound in the fabric of the world. And within it, Zeus. He did not descend. He fell like a meteor, landing with an impact that sent cracks spiderwebbing through the ground. Sparks coiled around his skin, lightning wrapped around his fingers like living things, eager to be unleashed. His gaze met Typhon's. Unflinching. Unshaken. Typhon lunged. The mountain beneath them collapsed. Claws like massive spears slashed toward Zeus, too fast for something so impossibly large. He dodged, barely. The wind of the strike sent him staggering, but he did not fall. He would not fall. His hand lifted. The sky exploded. A storm unlike any before, not wind, not rain, but war. Lightning rained down in jagged rivers of white fire, striking Typhon's flesh, searing through muscle and bone. But Typhon did not burn. He laughed. His arms lashed out. The storm shattered. Zeus had never known a thing that could break the sky. But Typhon was not of this world. He was born from the wrath of the earth itself. Zeus charged. The force of his leap sent shockwaves through the land, air splitting around him. His fist, wrapped in raw lightning, struck Typhon's jaw. A sound like the breaking of the cosmos rang out. Typhon reeled, but only for a breath. Then, he struck back. A fist, the size of a temple, slammed into Zeus with earth-shattering force. Bones snapped. The god of thunder was sent hurtling, his body carving a trench into the ruined land, slamming through mountains, until he crashed against the edge of the sea. The waves recoiled, as if afraid to touch him. Zeus did not rise. Not yet. Typhon was already moving. The land trembled beneath his steps, the sky darkening as his form loomed over the broken god. His hand closed around Zeus, a god in the grip of a monster. Then, Typhon squeezed. The god of Olympus screamed. The sound was rare. Unheard of. The heavens trembled at the sound of their king in agony. His ribs cracked. His breath hitched. The storm flickered, dying. Typhon leaned in, breath thick with smoke and blood. "You are not your father," he rumbled. Cronus fell. And now, so will you. His grip tightened. Zeus vanished. No, not vanished. Moved. Faster than sight, faster than thought, faster than the world could comprehend. Typhon's hand clutched only air. Above him, the storm reignited. Zeus' eyes blazed. His wounds dripped golden ichor, but his grip on the thunderbolt was steady. Strong. Unbreakable. His voice tore through the sky. No. The clouds twisted violently. The air turned electric. The sky collapsed. All of Olympus answered his call. The bolt left his hand, not thrown, but unleashed. A force too powerful for words, too vast for comprehension. It did not strike. It erased. Typhon roared, clawing at the force tearing through him, but even he could not hold back the storm. The heat of 1,000 suns, the rage of a god betrayed, the fury of the sky itself tore through his body. And then, he fell. Not like a mortal, not like a titan, but like a god who had failed. The impact shattered the land, splitting it wide. The sea rushed in to drown him, mountains tumbled into the abyss, and the earth screamed as it swallowed him whole. Zeus stood at the edge of the ruin. His breath ragged, his hands still trembling with the storm. His body ached, his bones begged for rest, but he did not fall. Because he had won. The air was wrong. Still. Suffocating. As if the world itself was holding its breath, bracing for something that should never be. The cave yawned open like a wound in the earth, its jagged edges slick with something dark, not water. Something moved inside. A breath. Slow. Waiting. Then, the sound. A heartbeat that was not a heartbeat. A pulse that did not belong to one, but to many, writhing, seething, waiting. The air shuddered with it, vibrating like something alive. And then, she stirred. Echidna. Not woman, not beast. Both, and something more, something terrible. Her body coiled, serpentine and powerful, a shifting mass of scales that gleamed wet and hungry in the dim light. Her face, hauntingly human, twisted in something that could have been a smile, but was not. It was a promise. Her children felt it. From the shadows, they crawled. First, the chimera, its body a grotesque fusion of creatures that should have never been one. The lion's head snarled, the goat's eyes burned, the serpent tail hissed, writhing as if tasting the air for something to kill. It breathed, and fire licked at the walls, hungry and wild. Then, the hydra. The cave darkened as it slithered forward, its many heads twisting, each with a mind of its own, each with an appetite that never faded. One head snapped at another, tearing into flesh, only for two more to sprout from the wound. It never suffered. It only multiplied. The Nemean lion followed, silent, but its presence crushed the air. Its golden pelt glowed even in the darkness, impenetrable, untouchable. No blade could pierce it, no force could break it. It did not roar. It did not need to. Then, the Sphinx. Her gaze cut through the cavern, gleaming with something deeper, sharper than instinct, knowledge. She whispered, but her voice was a trap, coiling through the air, waiting for someone to step into it, to be ensnared, to be devoured by their own ignorance. More followed. The Cercopes, grinning with mischief sharpened into cruelty. The Colchian dragon, its body curling around the cavern like the coils of death itself. The Orthrus, the two-headed hound, its growls like a storm in its throat. They did not move like animals. They did not wait like mortals. They were monsters. Born not of nature, not of balance, but of chaos. Of vengeance. Of hatred. Echidna watched them, her breath slow, her eyes half-lidded, but never unseeing. They were ready. She had given birth to terror. And the world would never be the same. The ground trembled, not like an earthquake, not like shifting stone, but like something alive beneath the surface, something stirring. A pulse, deep and terrible, echoing through the marrow of the world. A heartbeat of rage. Then, the first rupture. The land split like a wound torn open, jagged rock and burning steam erupting as something massive clawed its way free. Fingers like pillars of obsidian, thick as the trunks of ancient trees, dragged themselves up from the chasm, breaking through the crust of the earth. And then they rose. The Gigantes. Born of Gaia's fury, children of vengeance, monsters carved from the bones of the earth itself. Their bodies towered like mountains, their eyes burned like suns. Some had snakes coiling around their legs, twisting and writhing like 1,000 living roots. Others carried weapons torn from the land itself, blazing boulders, jagged spears of black stone, clubs of molten rock still seething with fire. And they were not silent. They howled. A sound so raw, so ancient, it shattered the sky. Above them, Olympus stood, watching. waiting. The gods had known this moment would come. Gaia's wrath was boundless, and she had sent her children to rip Zeus from his throne, to tear divinity from the heavens and grind it into dust. And so, the war began. Lightning. It split the darkness, a jagged scar of white-hot fury, searing the air before it struck, obliterating the first giant that had dared to reach for the sky. A scream, not of pain, but of defiance, erupted from the fallen beast as its flesh burned, its bones shattered into molten shards. But the others did not stop. They did not fear pain. They did not fear anything. Zeus stood at the edge of Olympus, his rage boundless. His beard crackled with stormfire, his eyes white with fury. Another bolt tore from his fingertips, ripping through the air like a living thing, striking one of the snake-legged giants in the chest. It staggered, smoke rising from its ruined form, but its brothers roared. A tidal wave of destruction rushed forward. Poseidon, trident in hand, rose from the sea. The ocean obeyed him, raging, churning, screaming. Waves as high as mountains crashed against the land, swallowing giants whole, dragging them into the abyss where the light had never touched. But they fought even as they drowned, their claws raking the water, tearing apart the depths, refusing to die. Ars laughed. There was no fear in him, only hunger. His spear found flesh, again and again, piercing through the thick hides of the giants, painting the battlefield in blackened ichor. He welcomed their screams. He drank their suffering. And then Athena. She moved like a shadow, a blade of wisdom sharper than war itself. Her shield gleamed with the face of the Gorgon, and where she turned it, giants turned to stone. Her spear struck with the force of prophecy, every thrust a declaration of doom. She did not fight for glory. She fought because she knew the world would fall if she did not. Arrows rained from the heavens, Apollo's wrath. Every shaft burned like the sun, piercing eyes, blinding the monsters who dared to look upon the sky with hatred. From the shadows, Artemis hunted. She struck like the wind, her silver bow loosing arrows faster than the giants could react. Each shot found its mark. Each kill was silent. But the giants did not fall easily. They tore the mountains from the earth, hurling them at Olympus. They waded through fire, through steel, through pain, and they did not stop. One reached the heights of the sky, its hands grasping for Zeus, for the king who had stolen the Titan's throne. But before its fingers could close, a club swung, Hercules. He did not fight like a god. He fought like something greater. Flesh and blood, muscle and fury. The son of Zeus struck again and again, each blow thunderous, bones cracking beneath his strength. The earth itself shook beneath his power. And then, the final strike. Zeus raised his hand. The sky darkened, every cloud black with the wrath of the heavens. The bolt formed, monstrous, alive, the will of Olympus itself. It twisted in his grip, power barely contained. The world stopped. The giants, for the first time, hesitated. And then, the lightning fell. It did not strike just one. It consumed. It annihilated. It erased. The air burned, the sky howled, and when the light faded, the battlefield was silent. The giants lay broken. The war was over. But Gaia still lived. And she would never stop. The sword was slick with blood. His breath came in ragged gasps, chest heaving, muscles screaming. The taste of iron coated his tongue, and the scent of burning flesh clung to the air, thick and suffocating. He stood alone. Before him, the beast still writhed, a monster of divine wrath, its body a grotesque mass of shifting, ever-living flesh. No matter how many times he struck, no matter how many heads he severed, it did not stop. Heracles' grip tightened around his blade. His hands were raw, the skin split from the endless fight. His bones ached, his vision blurred with sweat and exhaustion. But he could not stop. Would not. The gods had no patience for weakness. They had given him this fate, this endless cycle of war against the impossible, and he had no choice but to endure. The Hydra reared back, its serpentine heads twisting, hissing, eyes burning with something unnatural. It struck again. Too fast. He barely moved in time. Fangs grazed his shoulder, tearing into flesh, a flash of agony so sharp it nearly stole his breath. He roared back. Pain was nothing. Pain was a companion, a shadow that followed him wherever he went. He had been born in war, forged in suffering. He was not a god, nor truly a man, he was something in between. A weapon. Heracles moved. The sword flashed, a blur of silver in the firelight, and another head fell, its severed stump writhing, but already the flesh was shifting, regrowing. Faster. Stronger. Heracles cursed. There was no victory in this. A battle that could never be won, a fight against something eternal, something only the gods could undo. Then, fire. The torches blazed, and Iolaus moved, his hand steady, his gaze grim. Flame met flesh. The Hydra screamed, a sound that split the sky, shrill and seething with rage as its wounds blackened, sealed, cut off from rebirth. Heracles did not hesitate. One by one, he struck, faster, harder, relentless. And with every severed head, the fire followed, searing away immortality. Until there was only one left. The true head. It snarled, as if it knew. And then his hands closed around it, his strength unmatched, inhuman. The bones cracked beneath his grip. The last head fell. Silence. His breath came in ragged gulps. His heart thundered against his ribs. It was over. But even then, he knew this was only one battle. There would always be another. Always a new beast, a new war, a new nightmare clawing its way from the dark. Because the gods had made it so. They built their thrones on the backs of monsters and heroes alike, demanding blood, sacrifice, endless war. They wielded men like weapons, playing their divine conflicts with human lives. And the heroes, those who stood between gods and chaos, were never meant to survive. They were meant to suffer. To fight. To burn. Heracles knew this. They all did. Perseus, who beheaded a Gorgon with nothing but steel and courage. Achilles, who was sculpted for war, his every breath a promise of violence. Theseus, who walked into the labyrinth knowing he might never return. Men who stood where gods would not. Men who bled so Olympus would not fall. The divine wars were not waged by gods alone. The heavens did not dirty their hands with mortal blood. That was left for them. The heroes. The damned. The wind howled through the ruins of what once was theirs. Stones, ancient and broken, whispered of a forgotten age, their cracks filled with the dust of time. The sky above was quiet, a void without the fury of battle, without the tremor of godly rage. But the silence was not peace. It was the weight of an era gasping its last breath. In the shadows of Olympus, the last of the Titans lingered. Fading. They had been gods once. Their footsteps had split the earth, their voices had commanded the heavens. The cosmos had trembled beneath their rule. But now, they were nothing more than remnants, living ruins, trapped between what was and what would never be again. Creo stood at the edge of the world, his once golden armor dulled, his hands trembling at his sides. He could still feel the power coursing through his veins, but it was weak now, like a dying flame struggling against the wind. His strength, once boundless, was slipping through his fingers. He had fought. He had bled. He had watched his kind fall, one by one, until only shadows remained. Cronus was gone, sealed away in the abyss. Hyperion, the blazing titan of light, had been struck down, his brilliance shattered. Oceanus had withdrawn into the depths, a phantom of the tides. And now, what remained? A handful of gods too stubborn to die, too proud to kneel. A sudden gust of wind lashed at him, carrying the scent of rain and old battlefields, and with it came a voice, low, ragged, bitter. They mock us. Coeus. His brother, his last true kin. His form was thinner than before, his once mighty frame now a spectre of what it had been. His eyes, once filled with the knowledge of the universe, were dim, clouded with something far worse than age. Defeat. Cronus did not answer. There was nothing to say. Of course, the Olympians mocked them. Once, Zeus had been a mere child, hidden away from his father's wrath. A frightened thing, a whisper in the wind, nothing more than a seed waiting to grow. But that seed had taken root, and now the gods he led ruled the skies. The Titans, the firstborn, the rightful rulers of existence, they were relics, left to rot in the shadows. Another voice, softer but no less sharp. They have not killed us because they do not need to. Eurybia, once the mistress of the sea's wrath, stood with them, though her voice held no strength. She had long lost her dominion. The tides obeyed Poseidon now. The sky bowed to Zeus. The land bent to the will of the Olympians. The Titans ruled nothing. And that was the greatest cruelty of all. Not death. Not destruction. Irrelevance. Perhaps we should let them forget us, Cronus murmured, his words like ash in the wind. Fade into myth. Cronus clenched his jaw. No. To fade was to surrender. To let their names slip from the tongues of men, to let the stars burn without them, to let time erase them as if they had never been. That was a fate worse than Tartarus. But what could they do? Their powers waned with every passing century. Olympus had grown stronger, their dominion unshakable. The Titans were gods, but they were gods of the past, buried beneath the weight of a new era. And yet, in the depths of his soul, a whisper remained. The world does not forget so easily. He looked toward the horizon, toward the mountains that once shook beneath his brother's feet, toward the heavens that once belonged to them. There was a sliver of something in the air. Not hope. Not quite. A promise. They were not dead. And so long as they drew breath, the Titans were not finished. The sky trembled, but no thunder followed. The wind curled around the great columns of Olympus, carrying whispers that did not belong to the living. Something ancient stirred in the silence. A warning. A promise. Zeus stood at the edge of his kingdom, golden eyes narrowing against the shifting clouds. He had felt this before. The uneasy weight in the air, thick and clawing at the bones, pressing against his chest like a hand unseen. A prophecy unspoken, but never forgotten. The end would come. Not today. Perhaps not tomorrow. But the fates had woven the thread long ago, and Zeus knew, nothing lasted forever. Not even the gods. Far below, the world pulsed with life. Mortals built their cities, waged their wars, prayed beneath temple walls that bore his name. They thought Olympus eternal, a force that would never wither, never fall. But the king of gods had ruled too long to cling to such arrogance. The old ones had thought the same, and yet the Titans had bled beneath his hand, their reign shattered and buried beneath the weight of time. He had no illusions. What had been done once could be done again. A soft step behind him. Athena. Her presence carried no sound, but Zeus did not need to turn to know it was her. She had heard the whispers, too. The mortals speak of it again, she murmured. Not fear, not yet. Just the quiet weight of knowledge pressing between them. Of course they did. There had always been whispers, shrouded in myth, wrapped in the comfort of bedtime tales and drunken murmurs between dying fires. Stories of gods who would not stand forever. Olympus would fall, as all empires must. And though the words changed with the centuries, the prophecy never died. Some said a child would rise, not of mortal blood, not Titan-born, but something else. Something new. A force beyond the gods, shaped by their own arrogance, their own mistakes. A weapon forged from their sins. Others whispered of fire swallowing the heavens, the seas rising to swallow the land, the earth splitting open to reclaim what it had given. A punishment for the gods' pride. And then there were the oldest stories, the ones only spoken in hushed breaths, the ones even the Olympians dared not name. The fates had seen the end long ago. They had woven it into the very fabric of existence. And in that vision, Zeus had stood on the highest peak of Olympus and watched as it all crumbled beneath him. A prophecy is only a warning, Athena said, but there was no certainty in her voice. Zeus said nothing. Warnings meant nothing when the threads of destiny were already tangled, pulling, tightening. He had won wars. He had slaughtered titans, chained the primordials, crushed the rebellions of beasts and men alike. He had defied fate before. But the gods he had overthrown had thought themselves eternal, too. Far below, in the shadows of the earth, something moved. Not yet awake, not yet strong enough to rise. But the gods were not the only ones who remembered. And some things never forget. The wind howled across the cliffs where the sky met the earth, carrying voices long thought silenced. They did not fade. They did not forget. The world had turned, centuries had passed, but the echoes of war still lingered, tangled in the bones of the mountains, pulsing beneath the roots of the world. The war of gods and titans was over. Or so they said. Somewhere beneath the weight of time, something shifted. A tremor. A breath. The war had never truly ended. It had merely changed its face. The rivers still whispered of it, in the way their waters clashed against the rocks, never yielding, never resting. The forests held its memory in the way their roots clawed deep, pulling at something buried, something unseen. And the sky never forgot. There had been a time when it had burned. When the heavens themselves had split open, screaming with the rage of titans who would not kneel. The old gods had risen against their children. The air had been thick with the scent of war, the very cosmos trembling as father struck against son, brother against brother, as the world itself bled under the weight of their wrath. Cronus had ruled with hands that dripped with prophecy, a golden age forged from the bones of the fallen. He had thought himself eternal. But Zeus had come, a storm incarnate, his defiance sharp enough to cut through fate itself. And the war had swallowed the world whole. It had ended in chains. The titans had been cast down, their screams swallowed by the void of Tartarus. The ground had sealed itself over them, a tomb without walls, without mercy. And the gods had risen in their place, carving Olympus from the ruins of their fathers. But nothing ends. Not truly. There are still those who feel it, in the way the earth trembles beneath their feet, in the way the storms strike with a fury too great for any sky to hold. They do not know why their hearts pound when thunder rolls, why their breath stills at the crack of lightning across the heavens. But the old gods remember. They remember in the nightmares that creep into the edges of their vision, in the uneasy silence that clings to the night, in the way their thrones never seem to rest easy beneath them. They tell themselves they have won. They tell themselves it is over. But the weight of the past is not so easily cast aside. And far below, where the sun does not reach, where time does not move, the titans stir. Not gone. Not forgotten. Waiting. The storm still rages. The war never stopped. It shifts its shape, slides through centuries, breathes in ink and paint, in film and sound. It is a shadow stretching long behind us, a fire that refuses to die, burning in the eyes of those who dare to tell the story once more. The Titanomachy is not a relic, it is a wound that the world refuses to let heal. The old gods fight again and again, their voices rising from the dust of ancient scrolls, from the trembling hands of poets who pull them from the grave and force them to speak. They do not stay buried. Every retelling breathes new life into the war, reshaping it, twisting it, letting it bleed into the fabric of human storytelling like a scar that refuses to fade. The titans rise in ink-stained battlefields, in the desperate strokes of an artist's brush, in the thunderous roar of cinema screens where gods clash and the earth screams. Their chains are never strong enough. In words, they're given new faces, their rage sculpted into something different yet the same, a hunger, an ache, a fury that cannot be tamed. They become rebels, fallen kings, forsaken warriors. They become tragedy itself, reaching for a throne that was once theirs, only to be cast into the dark again. And again. And again. The story is retold with blood and metal, with trembling skies and shattered worlds, as if humanity cannot let it go, as if they see themselves in the struggle, in the fight that can never truly be won. And what of Zeus? What of the victor? He too changes with the centuries, his triumph rotting beneath the weight of time. Some cast him as a tyrant, ruling with hands stained in the ichor of those who came before him. Others make him a hero, a warrior, a rightful heir who tore down the old and built something new. The truth is never clear. The lines blur. The sides shift. The titans do not fade. They smolder in the cracks of modern myths, rising from the shadows in science fiction, in dystopian battles where old rulers refuse to fall, in rebellions that echo the same cry from the dawn of time, "We were here first." Even now, they linger, unseen but never absent. Their war rages on, not in the heavens, not in Tartarus, but in us. In the way we tell stories, in the way we shape gods and monsters, in the way we tear them down and raise them up again, always searching for something, always reaching for more. The Titanomachy never ended. It simply changed its face. And the battle is far from over. The sky does not forget. The ground still trembles with the memory of battles long lost and won. The gods may claim their thrones, may carve their names into the bones of the world, but the war never ends. It shifts. It waits. It devours. Even now, something lingers in the wind, something restless, something broken. The cycle turns again. Victory is an illusion. The Titans fell, but their chains could not erase them. The giants rose, and they, too, were cast down. The Olympians stand now, unshaken, watching from their thrones of marble and gold, but the whisper of prophecy is never silent. Something always rises. Something always falls. Zeus watches the horizon, his fingers tight around his scepter, knowing that his day will come. He has seen his father's fate. He has tasted the air of revolution. His rule is a fortress built on a graveyard, and no matter how high he builds his walls, the cracks will come. They always do. Power is never held forever. It shifts like the sea, restless and unkind, dragging gods into the abyss just as it once lifted them into the heavens. No throne is eternal. No god is untouchable. Perhaps that is why they rage. Why they strike the earth with storms, why they let war bloom like fire across the mortal world. Because they know. Because the weight of fate hangs over them like a blade, and they cannot stop it, cannot break it, cannot escape the thing that lurks beyond their sight, waiting, waiting, waiting. The war among the gods is not history. It is not myth. It is a pulse, a rhythm that beats beneath everything. A shadow that never leaves. And even now, it stirs.